include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. President Trump said on January 28th that a massive armada, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, is heading toward Iran, urging Tehran to negotiate a deal barring nuclear weapons. Trump said the fleet is prepared to act with speed and violence if necessary, referencing U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June of 2025. Iran's UN mission responded that it's open to dialogue based on mutual respect, but warned of a severe response if attacked. Iran has suspended cooperation with the IAEA and faces renewed sanctions as protests and economic turmoil continue inside the country. Australia's inflation rate rose to 3.8% in the year to December, up from 3.4% in November, increasing pressure on household budgets and raising expectations of a possible interest rate hike by the Reserve Bank of Australia. Housing costs were the largest contributor, while electricity prices surged after state rebates expired. Food, rent, and travel costs also climbed, particularly during the holiday period. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said the rise was unwelcome and unsurprising, citing temporary and structural pressures. Opposition leader Susan Ley blamed the government, calling the situation a cost of living crisis for families. Senior House Democrats have warned they will pursue impeachment proceedings against Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem unless President Trump removes her, citing fatal shootings by ICE agents in Minneapolis. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and other Democratic leaders said DHS violence must end, following the deaths of U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Priddy during immigration enforcement operations. A Democratic impeachment effort now has 162 co-sponsors, though no Republicans have joined. Some Republicans have called for investigations. Minneapolis has seen days of protests amid large-scale federal immigration operations. Trump defended Noem, saying he has confidence in her and does not plan to fire her. China reportedly hacked and monitored the mobile phones of senior UK government officials between 2021 and 2024, according to a Daily Telegraph report. The alleged espionage campaign, known as Salt Typhoon, is said to have penetrated deep into Downing Street during the premier shifts of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak. While it's unclear whether calls or messages were accessed, hackers likely obtained metadata and location data. The operation also targeted Five Eyes nations. The allegations emerged as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces criticism for engaging China while traveling to Beijing. Prime Minister Starmer has arrived in Beijing for a 3-day visit, the first by a UK leader since 2018, aiming to revive trade ties despite security concerns. The trip followed Britain's approval of a controversial Chinese mega-embassy in London. Due to espionage fears, Starmer and his team are reportedly using burner phones, laptops, and a chartered civilian aircraft. Critics accuse Starmer of weakness toward Beijing, while he insists Britain can pursue economic ties with China without undermining relations with the United States. Starmer is scheduled to meet senior Chinese leaders during the visit. China has warned Australia will retaliate if the Albanese government moves to reclaim control of the port of Darwin from Chinese company Landbridge. Chinese Ambassador Zhao Qian said Beijing would protect the company's interests and suggested broader investment ties could be affected. Both major Australian parties pledged during the election to end the 99-year lease, citing national security concerns. The port was leased in 2015, drawing criticism from allies, including the United States.
And international rules and order are confronted with unprecedented challenges. Humanity stands once again at a critical juncture, which prompts people to ask, where's the world heading? What should we do? China provides invaluable stability and certainty to a turbulent world.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Biodiversity is life. Our forests, grasslands, deserts, waterways, estuaries, coastlines, coral reefs, and oceans are all living ecosystems, our planetary life support systems. These living ecosystems are ancient synergistic tapestries woven over billions of years, long before the advent of agriculture, housing, mining, energy systems, and infrastructure. Now, the remnants of these ancient ecosystems stand under relentless siege from large-scale renewable energy infrastructure and critical minerals mining. The scale of this is so vast that it will sweep across our beautiful country and will leave a lasting legacy of sterile wastelands and add to the climate catastrophe. So, dear humanity, this is our plea. Let the guardianship of wild places rise above the false messaging of lobby groups that campaign for mining and industrialization of wild places as sustainable and green on behalf of profit-driven renewable energy corporations and investors. Destroying the remnant functioning biosphere, the ecosystems and habitats, is no climate solution. These are habitats that are home to the tremendous diversity of birds, mammals, reptiles, insects, fungi and plants that we call biodiversity, and these are natural climate regulators. Once they're gone forever. The clock is ticking, and it's only seconds before midnight. But it's still not too late to stop this onslaught destroying Australia's remaining unique wild places and biodiversity that we cherish and love for now and for future generations.
Visit Minnesota, a land of beauty, where more than 10,000 sparkling lakes reflect endless blue skies. Just as memorable as the scenery are the people who call Minnesota home. Minnesotans embody a spirit of kindness and community that visitors feel instantly. If it's cultural diversity you're looking for, we have that too. From angry Somalis to angry lesbians, Minnesota has it all. But Minnesota is so much more. Enjoy winter sports, we have hockey and skiing, and bashing law enforcement SUVs with a metal pipe. Fun, looking to go out in the evening for entertainment? Check out Minnesota's vibrant music scene. Or maybe an exciting fireworks show is more your speed. And of course, if you just want to spend hours practicing saying someone's name, you've come to the right place. What about the food? Shall we talk about the food? Okay, let's not talk about the food. But if it's cultural enrichment you're after, you can visit one of our world-class leering centers to leer even more about the fine state of Minnesota. So, if you've always wanted to visit Somalia, but are concerned it's too far away, come to Minnesota. Minnesota, because Somalia is too far away.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious program for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk, The World Today.
In their applications, in Moderna and Pfizer applications that they submitted to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, they are classified, so the manufacturers classify them as genetic therapy. They create a little mRNA factory in your body. That mRNA factory produces spike protein. It definitely does not get shut off in some people, right? I don't know if 100% of people it's not getting shut off or 2% of people it's not getting shut off, but definitely some percentage of people, that factory is going forever. There's people who took the shots 3 years ago who still have very high levels of spike protein. So the shot makes your body make spike protein. Spike proteins make clots. They do a lot of kind of bad things, but they make clots. And clots are typically the last thing that kills an organ or kills a person. So what is a stroke? A stroke is a clot to the blood vessels that go into your brain. A heart attack is a clot in the blood vessels that feed the heart. So you don't want to be building clots in your body.
And we're not there yet. I wonder where we are. We might just have to play something at the moment. Where's Cam? He's just disappeared on me. We don't have anything with me at the moment. Try that one. There we are. Hello and welcome to yet another exciting program. I can hear the drum roll in the background, and it's going to be actually a very good show. Talking to David Richards shortly, not about Welsh singing, but about some terrible things. Which could be Welsh singing, by the way. Stop laughing in the background. Just calm down. I'm just going to we're going to play a video shortly from Dr. Paul Marrick, but I want to talk about the COVID-19 shot and cancer suppression on a review. Now, it's a sad story that indicates we have not left the dark days of COVID censorship. Just a sidebar here. scrolling through news.com.au, there was a video there, and more information for those not even hit 50 about COVID and why you should get the vaccine. And it was sponsored by Pfizer. So I would probably keep well away from that. Now, the peer-reviewed paper published in January 3, just recently in the magazine or the publication called OncoTarget, reviewed 69 global studies and documented 333 cases of new or rapidly progressing cancer following COVID vaccination. Just as the bombshell study went live, the journal's website was mysteriously taken offline by a cyber attack. Ongoing cyber attacks are preventing access to the largest COVID-19 vaccine cancer study ever conducted. This gets even more interesting. What a great film this would make. The authors of the paper have been attacked, personally attacked, and then it got stranger. A Pfizer headhunter, sounds, I want your head, and the rest of you too, contacted the study's co-author, Dr. Wafik El-Deiry, praising his credentials and offering senior roles at the company. If you were a policeman in England, you'd say hello, hello, hello. He rejected the outreach and went public, calling it ironic and doubling down on the urgent need to investigate vaccine safety. And there's an urgent need. I don't see government doing a whole lot about that. The good thing is this blackout has backfired. Instead of silencing the findings, it triggered a worldwide surge of interest. PDFs, links, and screenshots have gone viral. However, the fact remains that malignant censorship of science is still happening despite reforms to scientific publications. Even more worrying is why, despite the research, the shots are still on the market and the regulatory agencies have not themselves been brought to account for negligence. In this sec, we'll talk with Professor David Richards, physician scientist, co-founder and singer of Australians for Science and Freedom. But first of all, we'll go into a video. This is a short video from Paul Merrick, and then we'll discuss that and maybe also the video we played just prior with Simone Gold.
Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Merrick. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the IMA, and we're going to discuss today a very interesting paper that has got a lot of public attention. So the title of the paper is called COVID Vaccination and Post-Infection Cancer Signals, Evaluating Patterns and Potential Biological Mechanisms. The two authors are Charlotte Kupperwasser and Wafik El-Deiry. This paper comes from both the University of Tufts as well as Brown University. This paper was looking at basically a narrative hypothesis generating review, looking at the temporal association between COVID-19 vaccination and SARS infection and epidemiological data on cancer. So they performed a review from January 2020 to April 25 across multiple databases and web sources to collect reports of cancer appearing after COVID-19 vaccination and infection. So they found 69 publications, 66 article-level clinical reports, and this included 333 patients in 27 countries, and which included two large population-level cohort studies. So what did they find? Well, so they were looking for infection, post-infection, and post-vaccination. It just so happened that 87 or 89% of the cancers were post-vaccination. So that's important. The people are going to spin this as a consequence of SARS-CoV-2 infection, whereas indeed it was vast majority of cases were post-vaccination. And so out of these 333 cases, what did they find? Well, the cancer types were hematological, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cutaneous lymphoma, leukemias. In terms of solid tumors, breast, lung, melanoma, sarcoma, pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma. Surprisingly, there were many cases of pancreatic cancer, predominantly in the solid tumors. And there was a certain pattern associated with these tumors. And this has been reported before in studies on so-called turbo cancers. In our paper on turbo cancers, we similarly reported a similar pattern. And so what they found was rapid progression of the tumors, recurrence or reawakening of previously indolent or controlled cancers, tumors occurring close to the injection site, and in terms of time, there was a clustering within weeks to months of vaccination. So this becomes important because in the Korean study, which looked at over 8 million patients or 8 million citizens vaccinated versus non-vaccinated, they looked at the hazard ratio of cancer in the first year. And the biggest criticism of oncologists is cancer doesn't happen in a year. The lead time is years, which is obviously not correct for cancers associated with the vaccine, because in this study, as in multiple other studies, there was a clustering within weeks to months after the vaccine. So what happened when this paper was published? Well, as would be expected, Big Pharma wasn't happy. So some unknown agent tried to shut down the journal. There was a cyber attack on the journal, and they successfully shut down the journal due to the cyber attack. So apparently the FBI have been involved. And then it generated an enormous firestorm in social media, attacking both the authors, but particularly Dr. El-Deiry, attacking him personally, his competence, and basically undermining his integrity. And he did fight back. So it seemed like there was a concerted, organized, well-orchestrated attempt to shut down the journal, shut down the paper, and prevent the paper being distributed. But in fact, it's had the opposite effect. Because of all the publicity and because of all the attention, all the social media, this paper has now been widely distributed across the world. This attempt to hide the data has now completely backfired, and the results of this paper, which obviously been reproduced multiple times and obviously accurate, have been distributed. What is even more interesting is the second author, who's one of the oncologists been communicating, Dr. Wafik El-Deiry. He actually got a job offer from Pfizer. Now, can you imagine such a thing so preposterous? He writes a paper highly critical of their vaccine and the enormous toxicity resulting from their vaccine, and Pfizer has the audacity to sincerely offer him a job. You can't make this up. And so this is another example of when true science results in data that's inconvenient to Big Pharma, and Big Pharma tries to shut them down. So clearly, cancer.
So there you are. It's all very interesting. That was Dr. Paul Marrick. My guest is Professor or Doctor or just David Richards. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, Mike. It's lovely to see you.
Yes, it is. And I appreciate that it's lovely to see me. So I'm just being stupid. I owe you a beer too, so I'm doing this under some duress. That's a very disturbing report, isn't it? And to see that the cyber attacks and the desire to hide it, to offer one of the researchers a job with Pfizer, and they're still pushing it. And I saw on news.com.au today, go and get your Pfizer jabbed. Of course, it was sponsored by Pfizer and supported entirely by news.com.au, which is the Murdoch media conglomerate. What's your thoughts on that video? And of Paul Merrick too. I think he has enormous credibility.
Yeah, I think he came across very well. I thought that it was a very balanced communication, and I guess what I would say is that this just reinforces a pattern of behavior that we've seen over the last 5 years, where data has been largely hidden from view from most doctors and most clinicians, and when someone does try to put together some cogent information regarding the safety and the efficacy of these vaccines, they seem to come under attack. And this is extraordinary pattern of behavior which I've never experienced in my 40 years in clinical care. Most of the years I've worked, if there's any kind of uncertainty, that uncertainty needs to be reduced. We need to understand what's going on. We need to share information. We need to take an unbiased, open view of the evidence that's before us, and act in the interest of the patients, the safety and the well-being of the patients. But the whole thing seems to be in reverse. That there's secrecy about the information. All attempts to garner information are treated as hostile, and instead of the onus of proof on the manufacturer demonstrating the safety of their product, it seems to be the other way around. The attitude of governments and public health seems to be that it's up to the patients and the people to prove that there's a problem with the vaccine. That's quite absurd. I mean, the null hypothesis is that doing nothing, any intervention has to do better than doing nothing, and we're not seeing that. We're not. The onus is being put on the researchers, on the patients, rather than the companies and the government to show that there's a safety signal here.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I looked at the one of the things here. It says the systematic review documenting COVID shot turbo cancer cases. Now that was across 27 countries. Showed that around 50% of the cancers occurred within the first couple of weeks of injection. Now, all this information that's coming out, it is disturbing. But if there was a normal 7 to 9 years, as normal protocol of testing these inverted commas vaccines out, this would have been discovered. Now, the other thing is Hedley Rees from the UK, and he says it's the supply chain problem too, and that a lot of these vaccines, he knows that they've been repurposed from, I think they came out about 2014, and they were deadly then. So obviously in Australia's case, for example, in the UK, the authorities are failing their public miserably. What do you think about that terrible thing that I'm saying, that they're as guilty as hell, and they should all go and rot in it too?
Well, look, I think the first thing is it's hard to draw firm conclusions about those kind of cancer rates, because cancers generally take several years to emerge, and so the idea that they can happen quickly over a 2-week period, to support that idea, there needs to be some genuine mechanism for that, and that's not forthcoming. But of course, the point is that the way in which we patrol the introduction of these medications is really weak. We have a passive reporting system in Australia. So I've done the statistics on this, and so probably for every one fatality in relation to a vaccination. I'm not saying in respect of causation or anything, but just simply by the numbers. For every one fatality, there's probably 10 others out there that are just not being recorded because the way in which we record our evidence is a passive system. We need to develop an active system to actually patrol these interactions much more active, with much more scrutiny, and that's just not forthcoming. The way in which the Australian Bureau of Statistics has approached this is, quite frankly, shameful. The way that they've handled the statistics, the way that they've literally, well, they'll call it smoothing the data. The way that they've smoothed the data it stretches the credibility to the extreme. And I mentioned to you a few weeks back that in 2022, the number of excess deaths that we saw in 22 exceeded the entire excess deaths during the Second World War, which is shocking. So at one level, this study raises more questions than it answers. I would be skeptical that these cancers were emerging 2 weeks after vaccination and put in causation in that respect down to the vaccines. However, what I would say is that the long-term effects of these vaccines in terms of carcinogenesis remains an open question. And we know mechanistically that when you have vaccines, mRNA vaccines, we know that they're contaminated with DNA fragments. That was by Kevin McKernan. He identified that. It's been supported by several laboratories around the world now. Fragmented DNA transfecting cells throughout the body is not a pretty situation because DNA's got a half-life of 500 years. So if that gets into the cytoplasm of a cell, then there's no machinery in the cytoplasm to remove that DNA. And so the DNA is going to stay there for a long, long time. And this is fragmented DNA, which we know is very hostile to protein metabolism in the cytoplasm. Just to explain this, Mike, every cell in the body, or virtually every cell in the body, has a nucleus. And that's where the DNA is contained. And the reason why the DNA is contained in the nucleus is it's separated from the rest of the cell so that the metabolic pathways remain discrete. Once you start blasting these cells with DNA, which then pollutes the entire structure of the cell, there's no natural mechanism to remove those quantities of DNA. And so the downstream effects are unquantifiable, never been studied, never even been contemplated that anyone would ever do this. It seems extraordinary. And, as clinicians and scientists, we need to be asking the questions, what is happening? And the onus is on governments and agencies to release this information openly so we can properly scrutinize exactly what's been going on.
I just want to take you up on one thing you said. You thought it was I think you said highly unlikely, or you doubt whether the cancers would have happened within that 2 to 4 weeks of injection. But it was a systematic review documenting COVID shot turbo cancer cases across 27 countries that showed that around 50% of the cancers occurred within that 2 to 4 weeks of injection. So that would clash with what you're saying. I just want to also, before we give you a chance to have a reply, which I do that, nearly 50 publications have reported a temporal association between COVID-19 mRNA vaccination and the onset of cancer. Epidemiological studies, one from Italy, one from South Korea, have also described increased cancer incidence amongst COVID-vaccinated individuals compared to unvaccinated groups. That's part of the research, and they've 330 cases and 69 global studies. Now, dismissing them outright, the response from academia, the media, and by our regulatory agencies have been sounding very much like a Welsh choir. But they're very loud, but they're all out of tune with reality. That's my humble opinion. What would you say to what I've just thrown at you, David?
No, they're good points, Mike. They're good points, and I think that they deserve to be answered, fairly. Look, the first thing I would say is that these are observational studies, and they are prone to bias, Mike. And I'll illustrate that by talking about the Women's Health Initiative, which was done looking at the effect of HRT on mortality in perimenopausal women. It was such a observational study, and as a result of that bias, HRT was lambasted with accusations that it caused increased mortality, cancer rates, and so forth. After 20 years, finally we sorted the problem out, and when we've done unbiased studies, critical studies, it's shown that the HRT is broadly neutral in terms of mortality and cancer rates and so forth. So it created enormous stir, and we're a little bit like that with these kind of studies. These studies are, the patients because we're taking different studies in different countries. It's hard to standardize the information that you're getting, and these studies are easy to do. Universities love doing these studies because they're cheap. They can do them on their computers. They don't have to do any proper field work, but they are fraught with difficulties. Now, I've analyzed this space very carefully because, obviously I'm deeply concerned. Many of my family members, patients, relatives have all had some of these mRNA vaccines, and I'm deeply concerned as to, what the implications are, and there are clear reasons why we should be concerned about DNA in the cytoplasm of the cell. For example, there's a pathway called cGAS-STING, which regulates normal cell activity, and this study, I've discussed this with Kevin McKernan, and the presence of the cytoplasmic DNA we know destabilizes that pathway and is likely to really lead to increased rates of cancer. And my study of the dynamics suggests that it's going to take about 5 years to see whether those emergent effects are realized. Look, we shouldn't dismiss the study. The study is valid. We need to understand exactly what the study is saying, but it needs more research before we can really hang our hat on it. And that's why I say there are more questions than answers, because it's legitimate, Mike, that you asked that question. We need to say to the authorities, look, this data is out there. It needs to be properly analyzed. It may be biased, but we've got to have proper scientists, people who know what they're doing, analysing this data for the sake of the health of the patients and all Australians.
Yeah, I think a lot more research, but here's the thing. Here's the kicker. If they followed protocols, it wouldn't have been released. But let's not worry about science. and that anybody who says otherwise, will the government they will shut you down.
Absolutely. And that was shown by Jayanti Kundasanda, who studied the original papers and showed that there were more deaths in the Pfizer arm than there were in the control arm, and that information was suppressed. So we've had skullduggery in the way this data has been presented right from the beginning.
Who would think that Pfizer and those would be involved in was it skullduggery or skullbuggery?
well,
same. That's a terrible thing. Just watch out, someone tapping you on the shoulder. Just quickly, we have to go, but if somebody wants to find out more what your organisation is doing, that's Australians for Science and Freedom. How do they do that? And just you got yourself 30 seconds to tell us what's happening with this mob of fine people.
Well, we're fighting for clarity and transparency in scientific research in Australia. We're concerned of civil rights in our country. We're constantly patrolling, the integrity of the data that that is available, and also trying to articulate for the rights and freedoms of Australian people. So our organisation is called Australians for Science and Freedom. We have a website, we have a presence on Facebook and X, and we have our annual conferences, we have annual monthly meetings. Please come and talk to us.
Professor, Doctor, or just David Richards, please do not sing. Thank you very much for your time. I've got to think of something else to rib you about. I mean, maybe we can get into your training for the World Championships.
Sure.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Otherwise, I'll get that terrible injection. Professor and Dr. David Richards, physician, scientist, and co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom. Thank you very much for your time. Coming up next, we'll trip the light fantastic right here on The World Today.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16. And so then it's just a slippery slope. As it affected me in the end, it was to the point where I couldn't even have money in my bank account because, I'd go to the pub or I'd go to the bottle-o. I started roofing in Sydney when I was about 20 years old. I had a crane come down on us. I jumped off the roof and the crane laid exactly down the line I was running. I could have ended up in a disability or life-threatening situation, and through that I developed PTSD. I medicated pretty heavily. I had a pretty pessimistic outlook on life. The glass was always half empty or whatever it was. You don't realise those things are impacting you so much. It's really hard to walk through the world. Depression and those negative feelings lead to thoughts that, you'd be better off not here. Suicidal thoughts are a terrible thing, You look at what you've given your family, you look at what you've taken away from your family. Dealing with that for extended periods of time and not talking to people about it is something that's probably taken a toll on me and my family that I didn't realise. My drinking got to a point where I was drinking in the mornings and, I had a job and my boss told me, it wasn't good enough, and I was so lucky that, my boss took me to an AA meeting that night. When you walk into AA, it says on the wall, admit that you can't do this yourself anymore. The second thing is admit that you need God in your life. Having that written there and it just saying, try and turn to the Lord, I thought, well, rightio, now that's my chance. I met Robbie pretty early on. I sort of reached out to him and said, where do I go? And Robbie had been coming to the Salvation Army Church and he said, look, come with me. And we spent a lot of Sundays together. That was pivotal in what I'm doing now. I believe that I was brought here for a reason. I came into the church and I was lucky. There's just so many lovely people here. It's the community as well as the church. One of the members prayed for me. And I think it was in nearly that time that my PTSD was healed and I felt like I belonged in a way. Walking close to the Lord has helped me use my heart more through worshipping the Lord on my own and connecting and drawing him close enough so that he could literally heal me. But when I start to fathom how much healing, glory, there's enough for everyone because that's how it's written, it's never ending. One day after church, I was at home, had an opportunity to see the kids, and my littlest boy was there and he was 8. And he looked at me in a way that he'd never looked at me before in his whole life. That's because I was sort of talking to him differently. I was really lucky to have that moment and to see what could happen if I just keep doing the right things and keep walking with the light. That was something that was pretty amazing. I'm going through a bit of a hard season now, with work and things. I think all I can do is move forward positively. But I really look forward to a future where I can see my kids and my boys grow up. So I really look forward to these next years to live a calm, peaceful life.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. strikes in under a second, leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Good morning for those in the UK or Europe. UK, you should have been probably out of the shower now, having your toast and Vegemite, we hope. For those in Australia, in New South Wales, you'll be just about getting home, hopefully. For those in Queensland, you'll be packing up your desk and putting away the ruler and pencils, getting ready to leave work. How old is that? It's disgusting, isn't it? That's what the oldies say, apparently. I don't say it at all. We've had a few torrid weeks in Australia, and the government and the major opposition party, the Liberal Party, revealed what many political observers already knew. Many of those in the UD Party don't care for free speech, freedom of expression, or freedom of association. Our governments want the right to decide for you. For most people who are law-abiding, not racist, extremist, terrorist, many of the laws passed are just simply wrong. We already have laws that restrict hate speech and discrimination against groups. Now, Australian State Leader from New South Wales, Chris Minns, said recently, "We don't have the same freedom of speech laws that they have in the US. And the reason for that is we want to hold together a multicultural community." What's the US? That's not multicultural. It's got everyone that sounds like that, you know. So it seems a multicultural community requires restrictions to free speech, and our free speech opportunities are granted by the government, according to Chris Minns. He knows all. Not something people are automatically entitled to. So you have to make sure the government says you have the right. We give you the blessing to say something. But if you say something that's not quite right, that we don't like, could be a bit hurty, well, we'll go after you. Federal police will be there. They'll come after you. The New South Wales police, forget crimes. Don't you say hurty words. Now, whose rights are the government protecting? One guy knows all about this and everything. Stephen Tripp is president of Australians for Better Government, vice president of Let's Rethink Renewables, and host of a magnificent, it was fantastic. When I was there, he got at least 6 people watching. I have that magnet, you see. Host of the Commanding the Narrative podcast. Stephen, thanks for joining me.
Good to see you, Mike, and hello to your audience.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the
numbers. I think we got more than 6.
No, they all ran away when they saw me. What's this guy doing on? He's opinionated, and I haven't got an agenda. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you would find that too. You got to have that real agenda. You got to have that, almost walking in water, holes in your hand. I'm going to save humanity. Otherwise, people don't want to follow you. It's almost like a cult. Anyway, that's just my humble opinion, Stephen. Now, what's your thoughts on first of all, Chris Minns? What's your thoughts on him? He's a beauty.
Look, unfortunately, here in New South Wales, it looks like we're going to be blessed with Chris Minns for quite some time, probably until he gets sick of being Premier and wants to go to Canberra and have a shot at Prime Minister. And some people even say he'd be a better Prime Minister than Anthony Albanese. But I'm here to tell you that Chris Minns is probably the worst leader that we've had in this country, because he is dismantling the fabric of what this country is meant to be all about. And he gets up there and says, I make no apologies that we have no free speech here in this country and it's not constitutionally protected as it is in the United States of America. Well, he's clearly showing that he doesn't understand what Australia is and how it was set up originally. Now, I want to go back to Sir Robert Menzies, who was a constitutional lawyer before he entered into politics. So you would think that he would know a lot about this whole subject. And he used to push back against having a Bill of Rights here in Australia. What a Bill of Rights is, as it is in America, I'm pretty sure it's about their first 6 amendments in their constitution. So it would be something that's enshrined in the constitution that the politicians then couldn't trust. And that's what he didn't like, because he believed in representative government, and he believed that the accountability that's put on the politicians in the parliament would be enough to keep the free speech protected in the country, and also common law. Common law and the parliament were there to protect free speech in this country, and it was a more fluid system than what he viewed would be, which was a system in America, which is having it constitutionally enshrined in your constitution, where the politicians don't get a say, the elected representatives don't get a say. The Bill of Rights is then ruled on by the judges that are unelected. So he wasn't saying that we don't need free speech in this country. It's just a different way of regulating it. Now, fast forward to 2026, you've got Chris Minns up there saying, "Oh, we don't have free speech in this country because it's not constitutionally enshrined." That doesn't mean that we don't have free speech. It's just a different system to protecting free speech. And the one thing that Robert Menzies tried to do was he tried to ban the Communist Party during that time as well. So again, here in 2026, we don't have a Bill of Rights, and we have communists and authoritarians running our governments, and that's why we're dealing with a lot of the issues that we are dealing with. And I just think that Chris Minns doesn't understand how we got to this point. It doesn't understand our history of free speech in this country. He doesn't understand why it's so important, and he's proving to be a massive fool by going up there in front of a camera and smiling with his nice little haircut and saying that we don't have free speech in this country. He's eroding the fabrics of this country and what makes this country so great.
What's your thoughts on the legislation that's passed? I mean, farmers, there's two. They had to separate it. Farmers, I mean, they're obvious terrorists. They go shooting.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I won't go into that part. We'll be here all day. But the other bit, the hate speech stuff. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, people know my thoughts. I think it's a great way of shutting people up.
Look, I just want to touch on the guns because, again, it shows that these politicians are complete idiots. I mean, they're mainly based in the city. A lot of our electorates are in the city, and they don't understand what's going on in rural areas. Hey, I'm here on the northern beaches of the city. You can put myself in that basket as well. I had a friend, Katie McCallum, talking to me the other day. She's up in rural Queensland, and she was telling me about the bushfires that they were having, and farmers were going out and killing their sheep to put them out of their misery because of the fires. Now, they had about 32 farmers going out and killing hundreds of sheep. And if you know anything about shooting rifles, those rifles get hot. So they needed to cycle the rifles that they were using to cull these sheep. So they would need about 4 rifles each. But you have these politicians, Anthony Albanese in Canberra and Chris Minns in Macquarie Street in New South Wales. They wouldn't know that. They would have no idea that's a requirement of these farmers to do what they have to do at certain times. So suddenly you've got them saying, "Oh, we want to restrict your guns. We don't want you to have this many guns." They don't understand. They have no idea what they're talking about. So it goes to show that this is not fit to be making these rulings. When it comes to hate speech, Chris Minns is saying that he makes no apology for not having free speech in this country because he wants to live in this harmonious, multicultural society. I'm not here to bash multiculturalism, but you can't deny the point that if we are having to give up our free speech, everyday Australians are having to give up their free speech in this country, then multiculturalism has failed. You're bringing in people from different parts of the world that are in conflict with each other. That's the reason why we saw Bondi. There's no other if, buts, and maybes about it. You had 2 rival groups killing each other because of conflicts a world away. It had nothing to do with free speech. But the politicians want to aim it that way because they want to push through their own political agendas. They want people to shut up.
What's your views on the? We are running out of time. What's your views on the Liberal Party? I mean, mine are sort of dry-reaching. That's how I feel. I want to vomit when I see them because they definitely are not the old, conservatives. Free speech, your own rights, smaller government, that sort of garbage. They don't embrace that at all now. They're sort of like used to be Labor light. I think they've had the operation and now they are joined at the hips. Susan Lee, or once known as Susan Ley, do you think she'll last? And do you think the Libs will last? I see Pauline sort of ramping it up and climbing up in numbers.
It's funny. I was on YouTube last night actually, and old documentary, a Four Corners episode about John Howard came up, and when he was leader of the Liberal Party back in the early '80s when Bob Hawke was first elected, and now a lot of the talk that they were talking about at the time was exactly what they're talking about now. The Liberals will never win again, and Labor's so strong, and they're ruling in every state and federal government across the country. So it feels like the Liberal Party, they haven't been in this. I mean, they've been in this situation before. They may be able to dig themselves out of it. The only difference this time is that you've got One Nation sitting there. And One Nation's been around for a very long time. Pauline Hanson's been around for 30 years. She's got that political collateral. And so is Barnaby. She's got Barnaby on board now. She's got a lot of good people underneath her in the party. And she may attract even more people at the upcoming election. So the polls are indicating that the Liberals are on the nose. I think it's no reason why. I've spent some time in the Liberal Party, and I actually interviewed Bernie Finn recently. Bernie Finn, of course, was expelled by the Liberal Party down in Victoria. And he said, if you haven't been kicked out of the Liberal Party, if you've been in for a number of years, you should be ashamed of yourself because the Liberal Party keep kicking good people out. And I think that's why they're in the mess they're in now, because I speak to people in the Liberal Party. I ask them the simple question, do you think the Liberal Party has been infiltrated by people that want to destroy the Liberal Party? And they all say yes. They all believe that the Liberals have been infiltrated by these moderates or whatever you want to call them. And now you have people like Malcolm Turnbull talking about an alliance with the Teals and starting a new party with the Teals. So, look, it definitely seems like the Liberal Party is doomed. They may switch to Andrew Hastie, that may, rise them out of the ashes, or Jacinta Price or someone like that. But it's definitely not looking good at the moment. They don't have someone like John Howard to come along and save them this time. And they've got Pauline Hanson looming there with the One Nation Party that will make things very difficult for themselves.
I can see an probably not colleague, but Shane Healy in the background when you mentioned Andrew Hastie. And I think the same thing. I think Andrew Hastie has become a pretty boy, and I'm speaking correctly. Just quickly, the One Nation, you've got about 40, 50 seconds on this. One Nation, if they get a few of the Conservatives that move over, a bit like Tories with Reform UK, One Nation could very well be the next, or become, first of all, the opposition, and then maybe squeeze it in for the next election. How do you think they will embrace Pauline Hanson, Prime Minister?
Well, firstly, she has to get in the lower house, even though the Prime Minister is not mentioned in the Constitution, so there's nothing to say that a senator can't be Prime Minister. But I do know that there are a lot of Liberals and Nationals, particularly the Nationals, that there are members of Parliament at the moment considering joining One Nation, and they are hesitant to do so because Pauline Hanson rules that party with an iron fist. If you read the One Nation Constitution, she has complete control over that party, and if you do one little thing wrong, she can kick you out straight away. So a lot of the politicians don't like that, because even though they are in the Liberal Party and they are in the National Party and things seem to be falling apart, there are a lot of safeguards and checks and balances within those two parties that don't exist in One Nation, so that's going to stop them from jumping across. You may see more like Barnaby, but at this stage, they're still very hesitant.
Now, if somebody wants to find out more about your activities, legally, of course, how do they find out about that? And quickly, the Commanding the Narrative, how can they watch and enjoy that?
Well, firstly, Australians for Better Government. We are not a political party. We exist to reform our system of government. We are non-partisan, so we don't lean into any particular party, but we want to change our system of government, which is generally pretty good. It just needs some tweaks to make it a lot better. And of course, Commanding the Narrative, if you want to head to commandingthenarrative.com, you'll find everything that I do there, podcasts, articles, and all the involvement that I have in Australians for Better Government and Let's Rethink Renewables and a lot of other things. We're doing an event in Dunedoo on the 21st of February with Stuart Bonds and Senator Sean Bell about the renewable projects out in the central west of Iran. So if you are listening in that area, please head to commandingthenarrative.com. Check out that event. We'd love to see you there.
And Stephen will buy you a beer, by the way.
Yes.
Terrible. Stephen Tripp, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
This
Mike.
is The World Today. Coming up next, folks, we have the protagonists, Bill Etheridge, Trevor Coult, and Shane Healy, and I am looking forward to this one very much indeed.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. President Trump said on January 28th that a massive armada, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, is heading toward Iran, urging Tehran to negotiate a deal barring nuclear weapons. Trump said the fleet is prepared to act with speed and violence if necessary, referencing U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June of 2025. Iran's UN mission responded that it's open to dialogue based on mutual respect, but warned of a severe response if attacked. Iran has suspended cooperation with the IAEA and faces renewed sanctions as protests and economic turmoil continue inside the country. Australia's inflation rate rose to 3.8% in the year to December, up from 3.4% in November, increasing pressure on household budgets and raising expectations of a possible interest rate hike by the Reserve Bank of Australia. Housing costs were the largest contributor, while electricity prices surged after state rebates expired. Food, rent, and travel costs also climbed, particularly during the holiday period. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said the rise was unwelcome and unsurprising, citing temporary and structural pressures. Opposition leader Susan Ley blamed the government, calling the situation a cost of living crisis for families. Senior House Democrats have warned they will pursue impeachment proceedings against Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem unless President Trump removes her, citing fatal shootings by ICE agents in Minneapolis. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and other Democratic leaders said DHS violence must end, following the deaths of U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Priddy during immigration enforcement operations. A Democratic impeachment effort now has 162 co-sponsors, though no Republicans have joined. Some Republicans have called for investigations. Minneapolis has seen days of protests amid large-scale federal immigration operations. Trump defended Noem, saying he has confidence in her and does not plan to fire her. China reportedly hacked and monitored the mobile phones of senior UK government officials between 2021 and 2024, according to a Daily Telegraph report. The alleged espionage campaign, known as Salt Typhoon, is said to have penetrated deep into Downing Street during the premier shifts of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak. While it's unclear whether calls or messages were accessed, hackers likely obtained metadata and location data. The operation also targeted Five Eyes nations. The allegations emerged as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces criticism for engaging China while traveling to Beijing. Prime Minister Starmer has arrived in Beijing for a 3-day visit, the first by a UK leader since 2018, aiming to revive trade ties despite security concerns. The trip followed Britain's approval of a controversial Chinese mega-embassy in London. Due to espionage fears, Starmer and his team are reportedly using burner phones, laptops, and a chartered civilian aircraft. Critics accuse Starmer of weakness toward Beijing, while he insists Britain can pursue economic ties with China without undermining relations with the United States. Starmer is scheduled to meet senior Chinese leaders during the visit. China has warned Australia will retaliate if the Albanese government moves to reclaim control of the port of Darwin from Chinese company Landbridge. Chinese Ambassador Zhao Qian said Beijing would protect the company's interests and suggested broader investment ties could be affected. Both major Australian parties pledged during the election to end the 99-year lease, citing national security concerns. The report was released in 2015, drawing criticism from allies, including the United
And
States.
international rules and order are confronted with unprecedented challenges. Humanity stands once again at a critical juncture, which prompts people to ask, where's the world heading? What should we do? China provides invaluable stability and certainty to a turbulent world.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Biodiversity is life. Our forests, grasslands, deserts, waterways, estuaries, coastlines, coral reefs, and oceans are all living ecosystems, our planetary life support systems. These living ecosystems are ancient synergistic tapestries woven over billions of years, long before the advent of agriculture, housing, mining, energy systems, and infrastructure. Now, the remnants of these ancient ecosystems stand under relentless siege from large-scale renewable energy infrastructure and critical minerals mining. The scale of this is so vast that it will sweep across our beautiful country and will leave a lasting legacy of sterile wastelands and add to the climate catastrophe. So, dear humanity, this is our plea. Let the guardianship of wild places rise above the false messaging of lobby groups that campaign for mining and industrialization of wild places as sustainable and green on behalf of profit-driven renewable energy corporations and investors. Destroying the remnant functioning biosphere, the ecosystems and habitats, is no climate solution. These are habitats that are home to the tremendous diversity of birds, mammals, reptiles, insects, fungi and plants that we call biodiversity, and these are natural climate regulators. Once they're gone forever. The clock is ticking, and it's only seconds before midnight. But it's still not too late to stop this onslaught destroying Australia's remaining unique wild places and biodiversity that we cherish and love for now and for future generations.
And welcome to the Protagonists. I'm Mike Ryan. Nice to have your company. This is The World Today. Welcome to the UK. Welcome to Australia, New Zealand, the entire globe. Welcome to Thailand. We notice there's some interest from Thailand and also from London. There's a lot of interest from London, in fact, from particular news agencies or media orgs. I won't call them news because they're not. On January 26, UK Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood unveiled a $140 million plan, including 40 new mobile facial recognition vans, bringing the total to 50 across England and Wales to scan crowds for suspects like rapists, murderers, people saying terrible things about the government, maybe. They can do that. The reforms create regional mega forces for organised crime, a national police service for threats like terrorism, and AI tools to save officers 6 million hours yearly on admin. And that's because they can't spell. While Mahmood compares facial recognition to fingerprints and cites 1,700 London arrests, critics from Liberty and others warn of biased tech, wrongful targeting, and a slide toward excessive surveillance. Question is, should citizens assume this is being done for their good? Don't even do that. Should they trust this government to use this technology to solve the majority of crimes they cannot now solve? As Shane Healy would say, can citizens be confident these people can govern without infringing the rights of law-abiding citizens? Why should innocent citizens, say for example, at a footy match, be viewed and scanned as possible rapist, or saying hurty words about Starmer, which everybody is, by the way? What can we be sure of is this: there will be more wrongful arrest, more infringement of privacy, and more tracking of law-abiding citizens on a 24/7 basis. So we'll talk to our panel on how dangerous these tools are in the hands of these idiots. Some call it government, who have already demonstrated their poor fitness to govern. They simply cannot govern. And if you don't believe me, just have a look. They're woeful. Our guests are Bill Etheridge, ex-MP and commentator, Shane Healy, terrorism and youth justice expert, and former ADF Special Ops operator, and Trevor Court, MC, is also joining us, is a decorated British Army veteran who served in the Royal Irish Regiment. First of all, gentlemen, thank you very much. Bill, what's your thoughts on Mahmoud? I mean, I've heard some, I can't believe it, I've heard a couple of people saying, oh, it's not too bad, it's going to make us safer. Probably the furthest thing from the truth, isn't it, having these cameras around? And what they do is, they don't make people safer. They just film the assailant or the person doing the wrong deed, and then they can go after that person after it's been committed. I would have thought more coppers on the beat would have been better to protect people than to have cameras catching them doing the crime. We probably need to hit your microphone button. It's a thing that's flashing. It says, turn me on. Are we there? No, this is a...
How about that?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Right, far away.
Schoolboy error that was, wasn't it? Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the way you posed the question. Everyone wants more police on the streets, or they call it bobbies on the beat, as it used to be. But that's not going to happen. And this puts us in a difficult position because for years, decades, policing has been cut back on, reformed, changed. So now you get more police actually sort of monitoring video screens, looking at what people might say on social media, rather than you do sort of walking the streets and finding out what's going on in the local areas, cutting back on potential crime before it starts by local intelligence, all the good stuff, all the things that I think everyone really has said for a long, long time that they need. But it's not there. Then you move on to the next thing. Well, and we've had this in my local area where they're what we call low-level crime, antisocial behaviour, smallish matters, but things that really do make a difference to people's everyday lives, becomes rampant. And people say, well, we haven't got the resource of the bobby on the beat. Let's use technology. And I'm reminded of the old saying when the gun lobby used to say, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Technology does not infringe on human rights and freedom. People do. And the problem that we have is we're in a catch-22. The public demands more policing of various styles of the issues that go on every day, inside out, little drug dealers here and there, vandals, fly tipping, that kind of stuff. The police aren't there. The only way some authorities can handle that is to invest in the technology to use more CCTV and facial recognition. Personally, I wish there was no need for any of it. Pragmatically, I can see the argument.
Now, Shane Healy, you are look. We look at your tweets and you post, and we look at what you have to say, and you are one of the few that don't jump to hysteria. And politicians do that. Look at Australia. You would have been there probably, hitting your head against a brick wall at one stage because they were moving all around all over the place and entirely incorrect. Looking at the UK, the idea of plonking all these cameras around all over the shop, it's not going to make the UK any safer, is it? What will make the UK safer? Shane, we are having an issue there. Can you hear us, Shane? Nope. What we might do is just quickly go to Trevor. Trevor, what's your views on the cameras and stuff?
There's a couple of case studies for this. Both the UAE and Doha, which are two in the top four. Say, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Yep. So two of the four UAE and Doha are two of the four safest countries on earth. They've got this kind of surveillance in action right now. In the UAE, for example, and the head of internal security who set it up, I used to work with, Sheikh Al-Nayan, your ID is linked to your profile. And so if you speed it straight away, they know. So there are some positives to it. One thing that isn't being discussed so far in the UK is a thing called gait analysis. So if we look at Manchester bombings for the Ariana Grande concert, if they had gait analysis AI technology outside, those bombers would have never got inside. That's the good. The bad is it covers everyone. So there's always going to be a bit of privacy given up for that kind of safety. So it's not so much just facial recognition. It's the complete holistic approach of looking at the individual's stride, gait, length, speed, temperament. And you'd be surprised, even when I was doing human work in the Middle East, you could pick the suicide bomber, you could pick the Taliban, you could pick the ISIS member in a village simply by his mannerisms. And they've kind of refined that into these AI packages. And it's actually been proven in those countries that, the UAE, if you've ever been there, you feel safe. Even though some of us that have been around will call it the terrorist banking area and stuff. But this technology is there to help. It can help, but you've got to, give up some freedoms. And people say, if I'm doing the right thing, why should I be looked at? The thing is, ever since 9/11, all our emails get checked, our phone records get checked, keyword searches. That ship sailed a long time ago. What we have to decide now is, do we want to be safe? Do we want to feel safe? And what lengths are we prepared as a society?
What we have to do, though, is, and I agree sort of, Shane. Normally I agree in most things, but I agree sort of. But it depends on the character of the government and what they're going to use that information for. And,
as we learnt with COVID, that's not a good thing.
No, that's right. So it does make sense in some ways, but it doesn't protect people initially from an assault. What it does do, it just shows you who did it. Trevor Court.
No. So hang on. Sorry, Mike. Sorry. Yep. No. So the idea, and it's been proven to do this, if I'm going to punch you, my body language will change. The AI, the analysis of it will actually pick me. I'll be more rigid. I'll clench my jaw. I'll in a posture, and that's what it picks up. So it can be a deterrent. And as they see in the UAE, for example, where I'm familiar with it, they've got a 70% increase in stopping crime at a personal level, motor vehicle level, then actually, like we see now with CCTV, that's who did it, let's follow them up. So, like I'm saying, if it was in action at Manchester, the bombings would not have taken place because it would have picked those bombers up, their backpacks, their demeanour, coming towards the concert centre rather than getting them in there and then doing post-analysis.
Okay, Trevor, I would imagine Starmer is not your favourite Prime Minister now, and even though you are meeting, actually, have you met with Nigel yet? Did you have a cup of tea with Nigel? I think it was going to be this week, wasn't it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show, Mike. I didn't meet with Nigel. I went down to a conference. I was invited down by the Reform Party to a conference where I sat with him and a few other different people, and we discussed a possibility of helping veterans, which is now Reform now have this party in place where they have good people, well experienced individuals from the veterans community, now helping shape policy with the veteran side of things. Reference AI, yeah, I'm not convinced it's 100% perfect yet. At the end of the day, we had the chief of police of Midlands used AI, and he banned Israelis from coming across to a football match, and he got that wrong. But I do understand why Stormer thinks it's a good idea, but it's not. At the end of the day, we wouldn't need AI recognition if we weren't letting in dangerous people in our country for a start. And if we didn't have over 150,000 people on a UK watch list, which takes a minimum of at least 6 people on a 24-hour cycle to keep an eye on one person, we haven't got enough people in the intelligence agencies to monitor the dangerous people in the country. So rather than stop these people from coming into our country, we've decided to tar everyone with the same brush and try and use facial recognition and different types of AI to monitor everyone rather than stop the ones that are causing all the crimes.
I just want to, by the way, folks, if you want to just jump in, you can. I'm just here to keep the thing moving along. What do you think, Bill, the reason, I mean, have they been planning this? Is it for our safety? I mean, I don't like Mahmood at all. I wasn't turned off by Mahmood with her speech, talking about how she's going to have AI all over the place and cameras and stuff. It's not going to work, though. And I don't mean to be, because I have to be very careful these days. I don't mean to be racist, but those who wearing the hijabs and stuff, how will facial recognition work? X-ray.
Well, it's a good point. I've met Shabana Mahmood, had a televised discussion with her, and I must say, for a Labour politician, she's not too bad. But that's a fairly low bar to get past.
It is.
I don't think that in this case there's a particularly sinister motivation behind this. I think it could be used in a sinister way, and COVID was mentioned just now, and that would be alarm bells all over the place if we had that kind of madness put back onto us. But in terms of your question about people in hijabs and so on, yeah, there is a difficulty. There's also a difficulty with youngsters going around wearing face masks and balaclavas and things like that, which, a lot of this, not the hijab, but a lot of the other face coverings became almost tolerated more during the pandemic times. And I think the issue is now, they still encourage people sometimes to wear these face masks. And I see some kids up to low-level issues wearing face masks still. And, oh, yeah, that's okay. No, it isn't. And I think personally, one step forward would be a policy where you have to show your face in a public space. And that puts away a lot of the issues. If you want to mask yourself up or wear whatever costume you wish, do so in private. But when you're in a public space, particularly if you're entering shops or banks or public arenas, you've got to reveal your face. And I think that policy should be adopted by most sort of sensible freedom supporting parties. It would make a whole world of difference.
Shane, I know.
Hey, Mike, can I jump? Yep.
Yep, you can. Before you jump in, you can jump in a second,
Yeah.
because I want to ask you a question also. Is there a better way than cameras?
So again, I want to go back to a lot of this technology was designed and has been used in the West Bank and that for many years. And they've obviously at the forefront of issues with around hijabs and stuff, which is why it's a holistic approach. It looks at, and I stress again, and you can Google, and there's a lot of articles and papers online about this and examples, gait analysis. So you think you're in the IDF or you're a security force on one of these checkpoints, having done it in both Afghanistan and Iraq. You've got all these local women lined up. Men aren't allowed to touch them or search them. And you're looking for tells. Well, we've got a lot of data now to see that if there's a bulge, if there's a slant, if they're walking with looking at their shoes. So it's not just facial recognition now. It's that holistic demeanor. What's their stride length? Is it short, sharp? Is it strided out? Are they walking determined? One of the examples I use, which is pretty funny, if you watch a Bourne movie, watch how Jason Bourne walks. in reality, if you're doing surveillance, he's going to stick out real quick. He's working with purpose. He's working rigid. And so this technology isn't just something they're designing now. It's been in use for 15 years.
And what about, though, can we do it better? Can we do it without cameras or as many cameras? Would more coppers on the beat?
So, well, yeah, but again, this is costing. So, and I go back to the previous point was excellent. You know, how many people in a surveillance team to track or trail one person? The resources in human and then money is immense. This is all designed to cut the cost down, and it'd be great to put another 100 police on there, but they've got to also then know what they're looking for. So there's a lot of training, retraining, building teams. You know, like if you're having done it, if you're following one person, it's not like the movies where it's just one bloke following him. You've got a team. You're handing off. You're changing cars. You know, you've got either detection to be seen or detection not to be seen. So there's a whole craft to actually doing human surveillance. So.
And we've lost Shane at the moment. He's having trouble at the moment. I think the surveillance has just worked and they know where he is. Trevor, what's your thoughts?
Well, if you look at some of the results overseas.
Well, just hang on, Shane.
To be fair, we had this, Mike. Mike, we've had this. Bill can even vouch for this. This surveillance that they want to bring in England now and across the UK, Northern Ireland had this since the 70s. We had it. We had golf towers. We had Romeo towers. We had surveillance. I mean, cars drove past everywhere. We were doing vehicle recognition. As for people, we used a system called ADH. I mean, age, build, close, distinguishing marks, elevation, gait, hair. We had this in Northern Ireland. There wasn't a place in Northern Ireland where anyone could move. Now, you got to bear in mind that Northern Ireland was filled at one stage with about 11 organisations, different terrorist faction groups, that went around trying to kill British soldiers, people that worked for the Crown. So we had this surveillance in place in Northern Ireland. Now that we have finally got rid of this surveillance, it may sound awful saying this, but I think the place that needs surveilled really would be the Houses of Parliament, because that's where they're making all the bad decisions towards members of the public. So maybe put the surveillance there. I mean, had we have left up the golf towers, the Romeo towers, and I used to work here, and it used to get on the net to one tower and trigger them on that there was a certain car moving in a certain direction. We could tell if there was something in the car, but the weight of the car, how the car was moved around. We had it all, but what they want to do now is bring this back, but do it on a mass scale. And as Shane said, I mean, to watch one person on a watch list, I mean, it's a lot of moving parts. I mean, to watch one person, I said a minimum of 6 people. If you've got 150,000 people plus on the watch list, you know, we haven't got enough people to do that. So rather than look after the ones that are a dangerous threat to our society, the ones that may go pop in shopping centres, it's best to sort of tar everyone with the same brush and do the ID. And that's what they're trying to force through. Rather than protect the public, they're just labelling us all under the one brush. And to me, it's not good. I disagree with it.
Don't you have enough cameras already? I mean, look at, I think you got cameras on every corner just about. So where are they going to put these ones? Don't tell me. I mean, but you have an enormous amount of surveillance at the moment.
Are you talking about London, Mike? You talk about London. So London's the biggest surveillance capital, I think, in the world at the minute. But why is that? Are we allowed to say that's because they keep putting 50,000 and 30,000 and 7,000 people that come off the boats and put them all around London? London is not diverse. London is dangerous.
As Ricky Gervais said, and I do agree, he it was taken down quickly because he was trying to promote his vodka. But he had a poster that said, "Welcome to London. Don't forget your stab vest." And I think that's a terrible thing to say, but I mean, it's true. Bill, do you think maybe we're a bit too sensitive to reality, or do you think that government is just so far out of the reality sphere that we're getting this unrest and violence and the UK is just all over the place? What do you think?
Well, certainly government is completely out of touch, and Westminster's been out of touch for many, many years, decades, and it's showing up more and more. There has been a degree of oversensitivity to speaking about certain issues, some issues around, as has been discussed quite a lot here, about people arriving in the country and we don't know who they are. There's been sensitivity about everything, because we went through a stage of political correctness where literally you couldn't say anything that might imply anyone with any characteristic of any sort might ever do anything wrong. And it was almost you became the criminal for saying that. I do think that the discourse in the UK now is changing somewhat, and there are some more direct commentaries coming out from people. And that's been largely due to what's been happening since the Brexit debates, where it's become more direct. Britain, the big thing that people often say, and it gets publicised a lot, and there's all this talk of Britain is broken. I get furious about that, because Britain, and I'm sorry to say this with Australian cousins here, I believe Britain to be the greatest nation on earth. I will always believe that, with great respect to the Commonwealth. I always believe that. And yes, we are having a rough time, and yes, we've had some bad governments, and yes, the state has been out of control. But we are not broken. We're not a mess everywhere. There's just a lot that needs putting right. We can put it right and improve it. We just need people with the right determination and approach to do it. And that's where we're at. So no, it's not a complete disaster by any means, but we can certainly get back to where we were and better.
I'll come to you in a second, Shane, because I want you to give us your thoughts on what Trevor's going to say. By the way, Bill, you are a great country, but you can't play cricket. Anyway, that's just...
I told you before not to mention that.
Sorry. Although we have mastered, if you ask the New Zealanders, we've mastered the underarm delivery too. Which, anyway, it's all cricket. Trevor, just tell me your thoughts on Starmer and his new laws on Northern Ireland veterans. It wouldn't make you feel all that happy, would it?
Well, I'm going to have to be careful what I say here. I speak to a guy called Bob Kraft, and only because it's for him. Bob Kraft has been given permission to be the spokesperson of the Special Air Service Association, and he was in Northern Ireland yesterday doing things about that. And I don't want to highlight some of the things that he's doing because it'd be stepping his toes. Bob's working really, really hard. As far as the legacies are concerned, I believe there's only 21 soldiers that fired rounds. At the minute, there's no statistics and no data on any British soldiers that operated their weapon or fired their weapon in Northern Ireland, other than the 21 soldiers that between them fired 108 rounds on Bloody Sunday. So they're still dealing with that. They are trying to bring out different things to prosecute. And the weird thing about this is, the Prime Minister, whenever he was a young lawyer and starting off as Attorney General, he actually helped shape the prosecutions on British soldiers, and now he is the Prime Minister. So it's a massive circle that's came around, which could probably be the end of him. As far as the legacies are concerned, to be fair, it doesn't affect me. I'm going to be honest, it doesn't. This will only affect British soldiers that actually had to fire their weapon system at terrorists in Northern Ireland. So any soldier that did fire their weapon, there's possibly the possibility of them being brought to justice, as they say. But at the minute, there's only 21 soldiers. So legacy is for those that were in the thick of it. I mean, I was very lucky in my career in Northern Ireland that I didn't have to fire my weapon, and many soldiers didn't. But the jury's still out. As far as I'm concerned, Starmer goes against everything that British soldiers stand for. You got to bear in mind that the minute Starmer got in office, his Attorney General that he brought in as his Attorney General was Roger Hamer. Roger Hamer used to be the legal advisor for the Irish Republican Army, a terrorist organisation who wanted to kill British soldiers, and that is who Starmer has now got as our Attorney General.
I just want to ask you, if you would mind, to keep talking about it, because having served there, then I'll get Shane to give us his thoughts, because I'm sure they are of great value. A friend of ours, he used to work for us, and he was in Northern Ireland, and off to work he would go, and working for the government, and he was doing his... Anyway, he left early because there was a couple of cars parked out the front. and he left early and went home. As he got to his door, he heard this almighty bang and smoke, and a car was parked right outside his window, and it just took it out. The next one went off and killed all those trying to help those that had been injured. So the obvious danger was very, it was there. So you can imagine the heightened level of stress and awareness around you, as soldiers do. Do you think this is a witch hunt from Starmer? And Starmer hasn't got a great record with troops, even though he wants to send them overseas to have a world war with anybody who wants to fight them. And he'll probably use those things that the veteran or that the immigrants are bringing over to get into England. He'll use that as his armada. But I mean, Starmer hasn't got a great track record. To bring this up again from a heightened sense of awareness in an area that they are trying to kill people, surely this is almost, in my opinion, and I'll ask Shane in a sec too, but in my opinion, Trevor, this is bordering on being obscene.
Mike, it is obscene. First of all, I'd like to point out that as a young lad growing up there, every single time we went out, my dad had to check below his car. My dad would go out first. He would get down. He would check below the car. He would do everything. My dad worked in the Common Road prison at the time, and in there they had the Shankill butchers in there. They had all the different types of people. I won't go into it. Those that did the hunger strike, Bobby Sands, and all were in there. So there was a threat on my family and other families whose fathers happened to work in the prisons. I mean, my dad used to carry he was allowed to carry a weapon at the time, and it was just shocking to live there, to be like that growing up in that time. But there definitely is an obsession with Starmer. There's definitely, and I don't know why it's Labour, but there's definitely an obsession with Labour. And every time I see Al Carnes, who is a highly decorated Royal Marine, standing there pumping his gums about how much he cares about veterans, I honestly don't know. And it breaks my heart and a lot of other veterans that we have a government that is obsessed with prosecuting them and are obsessed with letting terrorists run free. It's just shameful. It's like I actually believe, and I think you'll understand when I say this. I mean, I'm convinced Starmer's a sleeper that's been activated to destroy the UK. I really am convinced he is. I mean, he has no thought process towards anything. I mean, at one stage there, we nearly had the ISIS bride coming back and getting a free house. But and I've just found out actually last night, our government have repatriated 11 ISIS brides. Without anyone knowing about it. And what they've done is they've put a super injunction on the media finding out about it so that the public aren't up in arms. But it's shameful behaviour. I'm sure Shane can elaborate and Bill can elaborate a little bit more, but it certainly doesn't look good in the UK at the minute. I'm sure it can get better, as Bill said.
Yeah, Shane, we also bring in the ISIS brides and very sneaky.
All right, so I'll get to that last because I'm involved in all of that, but I'll start with prosecuting soldiers. Now, it's not just a UK thing. The Australian government under Scott Morrison declared all Australian Special Operations Forces that served in Afghanistan as war criminals. They set up an independent body, the investigator, to look at all of us for all of our actions in the 10, 15 years we were conducting operations in Afghanistan. They came up with 36 incidents. They've been investigating that since. No, there's been one arrest. The UK has also done the same thing with their Special Air Service. The New Zealand Special Air Service went through a review for their part. So it's not just a UK issue. The whole Five Eyes has gone back, even the US. There's a very good book by Matthew Cole, Code of a Country, about some of the stuff that SEAL Team 60. This is a widespread problem. I started my equine rehabilitation program to help those soldiers that I served with in Afghanistan get over their mental health issues, all caused by the government. Coming out and Mike could remember this, the old Chief of Defence Force and Scott Morrison, his Prime Minister, came out and said it's the darkest day in the Australian military. All these guys did all these things wrong. Yet there hasn't been any charges. So it's literally ended marriages. It's destroyed lives, suicides. It is appalling what our government's done. I've got guys. So I worked on a joint task force in Iraq and Afghanistan with the UK, US. Those countries are I've got mates, really good mates that are X-22 guys. They're in the same state. They're wondering if what they did in Afghanistan and Iraq, they're going to be charged for. So this is a really fascinating thing because it's not just one country, one incident. They've kind of thrown the blanket over anyone who was in those joint task force and gone over 20 years of the global war on terror, and they're listening to our adversaries. So in Australian context, the Australian Federal Police went over to Afghanistan, interviewed members of the Taliban and said, what did they do to you on target? Oh, they tied me up in that. Well, you're an effing terrorist. You're planting bombs. If you read the book Over My Shoulder, there's a story in there where I grabbed a bomb maker who literally planted bombs killing Australian soldiers, and I got investigated for it. I'm like, hang on, what are we talking about here? So they're not looking at the second and third order effects, the mental health. It's one thing if they've got a closed case, like we saw this happen, and then take action then, but retrospectively look at changing our rules of engagement in order to prosecute soldiers 10, 15 years post-service is an absolute disgrace. And that's what's happening across the Five Eyes. Now, before I get into the ISIS brides. All right, so I've been in the camps. I've been responsible for repatriating, I'll say, between 20 and 30 women and children. They go through a very rigorous assessment process. They're not just plucking them out. If you follow me on X, you'll see I post about this all the time. I post about being in the camps. I post about, the International Organization of Migration in Iraq. They actually go to our Rye jail hole, do massive rehabilitation programs. The Iraqi government has spent millions of dollars repatriating families back into Al-Anbar. I was the first intelligence operator into the caliphate in 2014. I spent over 10 years all up between 2004 and 2015 in Iraq recruiting these guys. And I remember going after Zakawi, being in the camp. So we've got to be very careful when we tarnish, when we say they're ISIS brides we've repatriated. For example, in an Australian context, we're now at about the 10-year mark of the first family coming back. Not one is reoffended. Not one still has a Salafist belief. Not one is an extremist. The kids are thriving. They've assimilated very well. So again, until one of them actually goes, and they get pretty heavily monitored, and I'm involved across the spectrum in a number of countries doing these assessments, whether it be the Vera 2R, the Trap 18, and some other tools we use with like Peter Lowe and some other people that are global experts in this. So it's a coalition effort. Just because they were ISIS quote unquote brides, if you understand Sunni Salafism, women have no say. For an extreme, a lot of them got conned, and I know this because I've interviewed them and spoke to, for example, al-Baghdadi's bodyguard was an Australian. He conned his wife and 4 kids to meet him in Turkey. Then he snuck them across the border. They had no idea of that. He got taken out by a drone strike with one of his kids. The wife died of appendicitis, and some of the family members were rescued in a camp by the mother. There's a documentary about that. That's one example of, she had no idea that her husband was going to get her across the border and make her live in the caliphate. She just thought she was going to Turkey. So we've got to be very careful when we just say they're all ISIS brides and they're radicalised. Some were bad, but, I wouldn't like to be pigeonholed, which we go back to the war crimes thing. According to my government, I'm a war criminal. I haven't been arrested. I haven't been charged. There's no incident they can pin to. We've got to be careful we're not doing that with the ISIS brides too.
Bill, and great points from both Trevor and Shane, but government then should be a lot more transparent. The UK government needs to be more transparent, doesn't it? So that we don't have comment and
in what way? In what way? So we're talking. In what way? Like, I agree, but also at the same time, they've got to re-assimilate. It's like the criminal who does 10 years in jail, he's supposed to have rehabilitated and gets let back into society. Is he always going to be the armed robber, or do we let him assimilate with a bit of privacy and then judge him on his next action? If we say we brought this, and the famous ones, the ones we know, especially in the UK context, are still in Belgium. They're not being brought home. So, there's a very famous Australian family. Their dad and uncle were very famous terrorists. That, you know, the uncle had severed heads on the front page of the paper. It's quite well known that family has assimilated, and they're excellent, and they've got pseudonyms, and no one knows who they are. I think that's what's got to be done. They still get monitored, but why should everyone be able to say that to that 8-year-old boy is for the rest of his life?
Bill, what do you think? And you think, Bill, maybe it's ignorant. Maybe if they, I mean, sure, keep it discreet, but at the same time, let people know, and that the right checks are in place and the surveillance is in place, and that the fear of the unknown is not to be feared.
Well, with great respect to what Shane's just said, and he knows far more about this than I do, and both of my fellow panelists have got experience that sort of an ordinary person like me would never have been able to get, or would even dream of being able to do. I have to simply say, we need a broad approach towards this, which is quite simply, if you have fought for our countries in a theatre of war, the benefit of the doubt is entirely with you, and rather than being investigated, you should be lauded as a hero. And, you know, if there's an odd occasion every now and again when someone's gone completely berserk, which I really don't think there is that much of, at the end of the day, these people have been put into a situation that 99.9% of us would never be able to dream of, understand, or cope with, and we've got to back them, not investigate them. The same thing, I'm afraid, would apply for me with ISIS brides. There's a famous one of Shamima Begum constantly telling us how she's changed. I'm sorry, I and most other people in the UK, I would imagine, don't give a damn. They went over to groups and organisations that were against us. I totally appreciate and respect the care and thought that Shane's argument was about that, but I'm sorry, I don't care. I frankly do not give a damn about these people. They went and joined organisations that were designed to attack, maim, hurt and kill our people. Our troops, our forces would not have to have gone through the hell they've gone through without so much of this going on. And yeah, nuanced approach from Shane, you know, total respect to him on a personal level. But I'm sorry, I just don't want these people back in the UK. I don't want them anywhere near us. They've literally made their bed. They can go and lie in it. Don't want them here. Want nothing to do with it. We've got enough people we have to keep an eye on. They are persona non grata for me. They should have citizenship revoked and never be allowed near our shores again. And I think I quite probably speak for a large majority of people who feel the same way about that.
Okay, so let me pose this to you. In between 2004 and 2017, there was nearly 250 Australian males left Australia to join ISIS inside the caliphate. The Australian government said no more, and they started pulling them off planes at the airport if they had information that they were going over there. They did that to about 400 youth. Between 2016 and 2020, Australia had 17 ISIS-inspired domestic terrorism incidents. So what we did was, instead of letting them go and fight and die in Iraq, we kept the problem inside Australia, and we had incidents with inside Australia. So if they've already done the Shahada, pledged allegiance to ISIS before they go to fight for ISIS in the caliphate, and we leave them back in England, in Australia, in Ireland, wherever, and they've still got that belief structure, they're just going to attack. And that's exactly what we saw in Manchester. So I agree with everything you're saying. I spent my entire life fighting, hunting these people in Australia and overseas, and I continue to do that. However,
mate, what you've done is great. Let me just jump in and say, and with great respect, and I'm genuinely, both the guys I'm on with, frankly, I want to thank them on behalf of everyone for what they've done. I agree with you. Let them get on the plane. And you know what? I'd give them the money to get on the plane if they want to go and fight against us. Get them in the theatre of war over there, and we'll deal with them over there. We don't want them here. I'm much more happy with the colleagues of yours dealing with these people out somewhere, some caliphate, and dealing with them in the way that you guys are the best in the world at, rather than having them walk in our streets. Anyone who feels that way about wishing to attack our civilizations, by all means, Go somewhere else, get in a theatre of war, and let's see how you get on against our forces. More than happy with that. Give them the
I
money.
would, thanks, Bill. I was listening to Shane and Bill.
I agree 100%. Unfortunately, it's against international law.
It's great that we have individuals like Shane that go out of their way to do this, and I tell you now, it can't be easy. I mean, it must be frustrating to try and bring these people back and try and fix them. Let's just say, but I just wish, Shane, that the government that invests so much into trying to fix these people in order to keep the rest of us safe, I just wish they would invest the same time and energy into fixing our soldiers. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Totally agree. 100%.
Oh, I completely agree. That's why I started my company, Pegasus Connections, to do that. That's literally what I'm most proud of today is the work I do rehabilitating mentally soldiers that have had mental health breakdowns. So I couldn't agree more. But unfortunately, we've got a plural society. We've got people that we have to deal with that still want to join terrorist organisations. Like we just had that incident in Bondi in Australia. But we've also got thousands of veterans that are struggling. And, you know, if you follow, especially if you look at my ex-posts or some other people that I work with, Al-Qaeda, they're planning, they're coming for us again now. There's 100,000 foreign fighters have been trained in Afghanistan in the last 5 years using weapons that the US left behind. They sent 10,000 of those. So the majority of the fighters that actually attacked Gaza on the 7th of October were from Afghanistan. There was only a few that were Hamas. It was a proof of concept operation for the US southern border. Most of the fighters that went in and took over Syria for Jilani coming out of Afghanistan. They were trained in Afghanistan. So they're coming for us right now. And this is why I'm really glad there's people in the UK that are really stepping up to stop immigration, because that's how they're getting into borders. We're lucky we live in an island, I guess there's the UK, but we've got stronger border protection. They are coming for us. And there is so much evidence for that now. So we have to do both. We have to fix our veterans. We have to fix the legal systems. We have to show our veterans and our serving soldiers that we care for them, that the laws of armed conflict and rules of engagement are in place to support them, killing these people. But we also have to recognise there's still a massive enemy out there that wants to kill us.
Trev?
Well, yeah, I mean, 100%. The one thing that I've been trying to push, and I'm getting nowhere with it and not getting any traction, was I don't understand why our government or our border force are ridiculous. They're not even a border force. They're a border entry. I've been struggling to get them, for instance, Connacht Barracks, which is used in Dover, to get that utilised and to bring in veterans. There's no better border protection in any country than to hire your ex-service personnel, because they will stand there, rain, hail or snow, and they will make sure nothing arrives. They're brilliant at it. They're already trained at it. They're trained in surveillance. But for some reason, our government seem to keep ignoring the veterans community and not bringing them online to do what they do best.
Bill, I've got to ask you, and I'll get Trevor and also Shane to give us their views. Governments around the world, if you look at Australia, look at the UK, they're very quick to label things terrorist. Terrorist this, terrorist that. And I'm sure Shane has something to say on this in a second. Bill, how do we stop one government getting this hysterical approach to stuff they know very little about? The police forces, they're not in the pocket of, but they follow the direction of the ministers, and then you have the public and the media also getting caught up in this hysteria. How do we wind it back? How do we start getting back to calling it out as it is, and not throwing the word terrorist is going to blow up everybody? And Shane will have an opinion on that in a sec, I have no doubt. But how do we get government, Bill, to stop being hysterical and acting like idiots?
Well, they need to stop using every single attack or incident as a political tool. There's a classic thing that happens in the UK where if someone makes a dreadful, awful, frightening attack, a one-off person who might at some point have owned a union flag or might have even voted for Brexit, and if they attack someone, it's suddenly classed as far-right terrorism. Far-right terrorism, awful, awful. However, you can get someone who will go out and shout things that make it sound quite clear that they're doing it for twisted versions of certain religions, and they're called a lone wolf, mentally ill, unstable person, just operating with no support or nothing else. So the governments decide what is terrorist. Two things that could be exactly the same except for what the person might shout or wear at the time. One, oh, far-right terrorists. Instead of actually saying the truth, just take the politics out of classifying these people. If it's an organised group of people, whatever their cause, then they are terrorists. And tell us so. If it's a random lunatic, well, tell us that. But don't classify things just for your own political gripes. And this Labour government and Starmer are classic at categorising anyone. I mean, we're talking about potential terrorists. You're classed as being a lunatic, extremist, dangerous and divisive if you say anything remotely patriotic by these people, because I think, as has been touched on, I don't think Starmer is a sleeper. I just think he and others in his party detest our country and everything it stands for. And their whole political careers and lives are based around destroying UK and Western values. And they are evil people. But take the quality of the ability to classify away from them. Maybe give the security services the right to classify what's terrorist and not.
Shane? Hello, Shane. Trevor, do you want to comment on this?
Well, first of all, there's a certain element of truth there, if I'm honest. I think we all know what terrorists are, people that go against politics, infrastructure, people want to cause damage and hurt, which is exactly the things that our Prime Minister's doing. So maybe the UK Prime Minister is a bit of a terrorist, if I'm honest, but there we go. We are very quick. The papers over here in the UK seem to, for some reason, I don't know why, they're not politicians, but they seem to shape a lot of policy by putting out the right stories and sort of putting pressure on our politicians that then bend. I mean, you've only got to put something out there and our politicians then start doing statements and start doing interviews. So I tend to set off a little bit when it comes to that type of thing. I've got my fingers burnt too many times when I've got involved and said things too much. I mean, I've been arrested in my own home for saying things online, so I tend to sit back on that. But I'm quite happy to listen to someone 27,000. Let's hear Shane, because they can't arrest Shane from here.
Well, maybe Shane, you have just about the final say, almost the final say.
Okay, so this is the space that I've been working in since about 2016. It's counter-violent extremism. So it's right of the bang. And so first of all, it starts with legislation. What has the government legislated as being terrorism? And you'll hear me talk about, like, for example, when I'm talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Sunni Salafist violent extremism. It's the violent part. And this is what separates a lot of groups and what people get arrested and what people don't in this space. If you're advocating violence, that's the offence. You can quote, out of the Torah or the Quran or the Bible, anything, and you could be preaching, you could be an extremist. People talk about vegans being extreme, but it's the violent extremism which pushes it into terrorism. Now, we've got to look at the group, we've got to look at the cause. And this is a lot of what I do now, is go in and have conversations with arrested offenders, whether they be right-wing, nationalist or Islamic terrorists, and talk about their ideology. And it's that belief structure that they think that violence is permitted in order to gain traction or get their political stance across. Just as the IRA used to use violence against the Brits to get an end in Northern Ireland. So that's what it comes down to. It's the threat or the action of violence which makes it terrorism. And so when you're arresting someone if they were walking somewhere with a knife to stab someone, they were going to commit a violent act, terrorism. If they're online saying, you've got to be a Muslim and that, yes, it's extreme, but they haven't said if you don't become a Muslim, you should be killed. That's the breach. And so it starts with your legislation. What is it's legislated in the UK and Australia in America that we've got to put against their narrative, their belief structure. And if that matches up, if their belief structure matches up with the legislation of that country, then that's what we do for terrorism. So what I do now is I get asked to go into a jail and conduct an interview with an arrested violent extremist, and we talk about their ideology. And if they believe that they're allowed to use or permitted to use violence in order to further that ideology, they're a terrorist.
Got to wrap it up. We've run out of time. Bill, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Well, I'm on X. Just put in my name, Bill Etheridge, and Bill Etheridge UK, I think it comes up as. You're more than welcome to follow me on there, and I'd love to have some exchanges with people.
Thank you very much for joining us. Shane Healy, same question. How do they find out more about you?
Yeah, so I've got a ex-terrorist hunter, and I'm in a couple of think tanks, and we post a lot of our intelligence information, both global, regional, and stuff on there. I'll always pose a question, so it's not just this is what's happening. Why do you think this is happening? And try to get conversation started. Mainly, it's to educate, because I'm still being educated. Like I said, I work with other people because I'm still learning. This is an evolving space, but X is the best place to find me.
Mm-hmm. And Trevor Court, MC.
Well, truth is, Mike, I don't want people to find me.
Yes, you do. You're on YouTube.
I'm on YouTube. That's it. I just keep myself to myself.
Because you've got to buy everybody a beer. But
using a VPN in the Tor browser, so we can't be tracked.
That's right. Tell me about your YouTube. But if they want to watch you on your YouTube channel, how do they do that?
Just type in my name, Trevor Colt MC. My YouTube channel comes up. I'm usually slagging off the government, politicians, or celebrities. It's quite good.
Quick question for Shane. Shane, do you think the government knows where Trevor is? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on The Protagonists. This is The World Today, and we'll catch you.
Google Pegasus app.
There you are. Plug it and go for it. Thank you very much. Catch you, everybody, again tomorrow for The Protagonists. This is The World Today.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The European Council has approved a ban on Russian gas imports, though extensive exemptions mean supplies could continue for years. The phased plan begins with banning Russian LNG in January 2027, followed by pipeline gas in autumn of 2027, with landlocked states allowed purchases until 2028. Emergency safeguards permit exceptions if supply is threatened. Hungary and Slovakia opposed the measure, while Bulgaria abstained. Russian gas still accounts for about 13% of EU imports. The ban includes heavy penalties for violations and is intended to be permanent, preventing future reintegration of Russian energy even after the Ukraine war ends. The European Union has agreed to expanded legal migration from India as part of its largest ever free trade agreement with New Delhi. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a mobility scheme covering students, researchers, and skilled workers, along with a new legal gateway office in India. Indian nationals already rank second for EU residence permits. The deal comes despite high youth unemployment in Europe. Alongside migration measures, the trade agreement will cut tariffs on most goods, saving EU businesses billions annually and boosting exports, though critics warn it may encourage offshoring to lower-wage India. Rwanda has launched arbitration proceedings against the United Kingdom, accusing it of breaching financial and resettlement commitments under the now-scrapped Migration and Economic Development Partnership. Kigali said it filed a notice with the Permanent Court of Arbitration in November, alleging Britain failed to honor agreed payments and refused to resettle vulnerable refugees from Rwanda. The asylum deal, announced in 2022 under Prime Minister Boris Johnson, aimed to send illegal arrivals to Rwanda for processing. Prime Minister Keir Starmer ended the scheme in July 2024, calling it ineffective. Rwanda said London sought to forego two £50 million payments and terminated the deal without proper notice, despite contractual provisions. Elon Musk and Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski exchanged insults on X after Sikorski accused Musk of profiting from war crimes and failing to prevent Russian forces from using Starlink in Ukraine. Sikorski cited a report claiming Russian drones are being equipped with Starlink systems to improve range and accuracy. Musk responded by calling Sikorski a drooling imbecile, saying Starlink underpins Ukraine's military communications. The dispute follows earlier clashes between the two, including Musk's calls to dissolve the EU and his criticism of EU regulations after X was fined under the Digital Services Act. Sikorski previously told Musk to go to Mars. U.S. authorities have released two Russian sailors detained after the seizure of the Russian-flagged oil tanker Marinera, accused of violating U.S. sanctions on Venezuelan oil, according to Russia's foreign ministry. The vessel was intercepted in the North Atlantic on January 7th after being tracked from the Caribbean. Moscow condemned the seizure as illegal and demanded the sailors' release. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova confirmed the two Russians are returning home. The tanker carried a multinational crew. The U.S. has seized several tankers enforcing sanctions on Venezuela, though it's now preparing to ease restrictions through a broader licensing regime. The BBC has apologized after failing to specify that Jews were the victims when covering International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Several BBC presenters referred to 6 million people murdered by the Nazis without noting they were targeted for being Jewish. Jewish leaders and groups condemned the omission as hurtful and a form of Holocaust distortion. Former envoy Lord Pickles and Holocaust Educational Trust CEO Karen Pollack criticized the broadcaster for diluting the Holocaust Jewish specificity.
Today marks Holocaust Memorial Day, a day for remembering the 6 million people who were murdered by the Nazi regime over 80 years ago.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around. And then for the defense, our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud. Safe with me. How long do you think we're gonna stay here for? Our house, in the middle of our street. Our house, in the middle of our...
The climate right now is no warmer than it's been many times throughout history. Our baseline is now the lowest that carbon dioxide has been in 600 million years. As far as temperature change, the IPCC's first report of 1992 showed that the medieval warm period was warmer than the present. Well, this didn't fit the narrative, so by the time the 1996 report came out, it was a completely contrived graph called the hockey stick. So what they did was they got rid of the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age, and so instead of the graph doing this, they flattened it out, and then they added instrumental record on the end that looks like it's going way up. The point is that the people that are calling them out on it are not getting the media coverage. You know, because look, at this point there's billions of dollars going into the whole climate change narrative.
A hoax about carbon dioxide in the climate has caused a global energy and economic disaster. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. I'm Mike Ryan. Nice to have your company. We're going to talk about what happens when Russia wins the Ukraine war and they're winning now? There's no reason to see otherwise. Not a whole lot of opposition, except a foolish NATO and most likely a foolish Ukraine. Now, we are pleased today to welcome back Richard Sakwa, Emeritus Professor of Politics from the University of Kent at Canterbury in the UK. Richard is a respected expert, having written widely on comparative politics, international relations, and political philosophy, with a focus on Russian and European affairs. His latest books are many, including The Putin Paradox, Bloomsbury in 2020, Deception, Russiagate and the New Cold War, Lexicon Books 2022, and The Russia Scare, Fake News and Genuine Threat from Rutledge 2022, The Lost Peace, How the West Failed to Prevent a Second Cold War, Yale University, and The Culture of the Second Cold War, Anthem Press 2025. His book, The Russo-Ukrainian War, Follies of Empire, is forthcoming in 2026. Now, we're going to be talking to Richard today about the Russian-Ukraine war, a war that the West has been stoking and supporting for years, to the utter destruction of the Ukrainians and their own economies. There's no doubt Russia is winning the war on many fronts. The West or the Europeans just need to face the facts. We're going to ask Richard what he sees the short-term future holds, and what will a Russian-conquered Ukraine look like? And what of the coalition of the willing? What will they be forced to do? Plenty of questions to ask. First of all, Richard, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
First of all, tell me about the war. How long do we? I mean, it's like asking how long is a piece of string, but how long do we have before it's finished?
Well, as you say, it's impossible to forecast, because clearly the front line has been moving, but it's been moving very slowly. In Donetsk, which about 15% of Donetsk Oblast, the region, is still defended by the Ukrainians, but Russia's moving forwards in Zaporozhye region, a larger enclave in Sumy, and so on. I think the decisive factor is going to be whether the Ukrainian can maintain its resilience and support for the next few months, because we know there's massive shortage of manpower, enormous defections or people going AWOL, and of course recently announced that several million men who would be of conscription age have left or avoiding conscription. So, and just one other factor is, of course, is the way that drone warfare has given the advantage to the defender, and it really has meant it's like the First World War with the trench warfare, with a 21st century twist, which means that the skies are permanently monitored, and at the slightest movement, slightest accumulation of forces is immediately attacked, and the ranges are getting longer and longer, 30 miles now minimum.
Are we going to see more aggressive attacks on cities in Ukraine?
Well, on the energy network, yes. I mean, it's been Ukraine has been lucky for the last 2 or 3 years, because the winters have been quite mild. This year, there's a polar high pressure system, which in Russia and of course in Northern Europe, by the way, Scandinavia and the United States at the moment, and it's bitterly cold. Yes, Russia has offered an energy, as it were, armistice a few times, and spectacularly in August 2024, and it was brokered by Qatar. And instead of accepting that, Zelensky personally, with logistic support from the British, attacked Kursk, which is a region of Russia. And since then, there has been no energy armistice, and in fact, it's now being intensifying. It's a terribly cruel and awful thing, especially in winter, in which already we know at least 600,000 people from the city of Kiev have had to leave, because it's becoming almost unlivable.
What are some of the milestones from a Russian's point of view in their domination of the territory?
Well, it's at the moment it's not just about territory. When there's much talk of the Trumpian peace talks and so on. Yes, as a minimum, and these were outlined in June 2024, Russia's war aims, and they haven't changed. They're a bit tougher, well, much tougher than what was on the table in Istanbul. This was the talks between Russia and Ukraine just weeks after the beginning of the war in February 2022. And in June 2024, Putin outlined three major elements, which is, of course, a neutral and non-militarized Ukraine, which could be no longer a threat, the internal transformation of the state to make it, as far from the Russian perspective, a tolerant, multicultural, multi-confessional, multilingual state, rather than this rather harsh ethnocratic, well, monolinguistic and monocultural society which has emerged. And the third thing is territory. The minimum is Donetsk and Lugansk. This is the heartlands of the Donbass. So the milestones, well, I mean, it's, of course, there's talks continuing. The Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the Russian side have changed their team. So talks, they're due to meet again in the next few days. So that's the immediate milestone.
At what point does Ukraine say enough, raises the white flag?
Yeah, that's that's a great question, because you would have thought that, well, this it comes back to a question of what do we mean by winning and what do we mean by losing. In my view, that any sustainable peace or victory, if you want to use that language, has to encompass a situation in which the post-war Ukraine and post-war Russia, as well as post-war Europe, can live comfortably. It's no good if any of those three elements, and of course, the fourth element is the US-Russian relationship, which is bumpy, but at least there's elements of rapprochement, which I think is much to be welcomed. But it's no good if any one of those elements, Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, are dissatisfied. All they will do is stoke a renewal of war in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. This is why the Korean option of an armistice, and of course, technically, North and South Korea are still at war. Technically, by the way, Japan and Russia haven't actually had a peace treaty because of the Kuril Islands. I don't think we want to see that in Europe. So there has to be a comprehensive package, and this can continue side by side with a continuation of hostilities. Whereas the European Union and its individual members have got this extraordinary idea that you don't talk in the middle of a war. They were talking in the Vietnam War from 1968 onwards, certainly from 1972, and it ended in 1975. So it's an utterly bizarre European position. The Ukrainians, of course, now engaging in talks finally. When will they throw in a top? When will they accept? I'd put it differently. When will they accept the realities that Russia is a nuclear power? It's obviously far bigger, far more powerful. Its economy has survived unprecedented sanctions. Yes, it has damaged it in certain ways. Yet Russia is still a type of neo-Soviet economy with vast industrial plants. Now, Russia, as in all its wars, it gears up very slowly, but it's now geared up for a long haul. And also, I mean, the Ukrainians were always banking that there would be regime change in Moscow, that there would be popular opposition to the war. Now, my views, and talking a lot about this, is that very few Russians are enthusiastic about the war, but it's perceived as a grim necessity. That how on earth could they accept a Ukraine which has Tomahawk missiles, which is armed to the teeth? The 20-point peace plan brokered between the United States and Kiev was about an 800,000 strong Ukrainian army, which is just absurd when this was reinforced by the so-called coalition of the willing, putting in NATO forces in Ukraine, which is what this war is about. So, and just to say that the final immediate element, of course, is that Trump is saying he will not sign the security guarantees, which have now been accepted, until Ukraine gives up basically that 15% of Donetsk. So that's one of the immediate issues. And that's, they're now saying there's a peace deal 95% finished. Well, that 5% is a fundamental sticking point.
When they raise the white flag, and I think white flag's a bit simplistic, but when they do that, how do you think Europe will react? We have fearsome leaders, Macron, von der Leyen, a whole bunch of them. And I'm saying that with tongue in cheek. But what will Europe do? How will they react? They, quite keen to send a peace force into Ukraine, and Putin definitely does not want that. So how will they react?
Just to say that peace force, it's a lot of big talk, but the peace force, they say it needs a backstop, a US backstop, which at the moment we're seeing, which of course is no peace force at all, ultimately. And they'd be very hard pressed even to muster the sufficient men and arms. So the Russians, of course, it's absolutely a no-no. It's not on. So, but there is a little bit of movement. Yesterday, the European Union was talking about a new package of sanctions. Which was quite extraordinary, including finally cutting off energy either exports or imports from Russia. But there are signs that they now understand they need to talk. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian leader, said it. Even Macron, who has now said that they need to engage with Moscow. Because one of the most sad elements at the moment is that this war is on our European continent, and yet there are no major European leaders engaged in the talks. They've been totally marginalized. And of course, and even I'd go further, humiliated. This was the case reflected in US documents which have just come out, the National Security Strategy of December last year, 2025, which basically talked about civilizational erasure in Europe. It's no longer central in that Trumpian global perspective. The National Defense Strategy also basically said Europe has to do more to defend itself, but they accepted. It will actually have to come at the trade-off in cutting welfare, cutting infrastructure development, cutting all the rest at the time of major crisis in Europe itself. So it's a very gloomy future, I think, for most of Western Europe.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's going to be an interesting lesson in 200 years' time in history, and they'll be shaking their heads, I would imagine, thinking, how the hell did they get there? I just want to know your thoughts about when the war is over, which parts of the Ukraine do you think that Russia won't have their hands on? There'll be some parts that will be out of Russian control.
Yeah. So one of the key war aims from the beginning has been a very ambitious one. You could call it maximalist, which has been a type of, well, it's not so much even regime change, but for Ukraine to go back to what it said it would do in its declaration of state sovereignty in 1990, and what it also said in the Declaration of Independence in August 1991, and so on, basically to become a neutral state, to become, militarized is another issue, but basically not a member of NATO, not a member, if not a member of NATO, but no NATO in Ukraine itself. So what happens to the rump Ukraine, the non-Moscow dominated? It's a fundamental question. Now, what I would like to see is that it emerges purged, if I can use that word, of its extreme ethno-nationalist wing. Of course, they don't win. There's ultra-rightists, the semi-fascist element, which has dominated for so long because since 2014, they've had the coercive power. Zelensky, the president today, he was elected in 2019, as the peace candidate, as a Russian speaker. And he said he would do anything for peace. Within months, he was humiliated and marginalized and forced to change his tune by this huge constituency. That will have to go so that we can allow the voice of what I call the other Ukraine. This is the one that calls for a pluralistic, multi-confessional, what we said earlier, multilingual. And I'd like to see a thriving, prosperous, because basically the Ukrainian people twice voted for peace in May 2014, just after the Maidan, and again in April 2019. The people, until then, of course, they're angry now after 4 years of catastrophic war, where at least, I think, 1 million men have died. I mean, and millions are scattered to the four winds. We have to reconstitute, and that would take a change not just in the thinking of Kiev, but also in the thinking of Brussels. And unfortunately, there is no sign of that. The peace deal on the table at the moment is a state of permanent hostility. That means it's an armistice and not a peace. And you're going back to your earlier great question, when will Ukraine throw in the towel? Well, they're very stubborn people. Some people would say that stubbornness, which is, of course, laudable in certain circumstances, has now moved to the point of stupidity. Opinion is shifting within Ukraine, accepting that a bad deal is better than a no deal. But as I say, it has to be accompanied. I mean, it's extraordinary the way that Brussels and Western commentators argue that Russia wants to subjugate Ukraine. It is no subjugation to have a peaceful, neutral, non-aligned, thriving, democratic Ukraine. Russia is not afraid of democracy. There's plenty of democracy as well. I'm thinking of Georgia, Armenia, others on its border. It's not democracy the issue, which a lot of the Western framers would say this is imperial ambitions. No, this war is about security, and it will only end when we have a secure Europe, secure Ukraine, and a secure Russia.
Just as just a sidebar here, just imagine you were the editor for the Times and Ukraine surrendered. How do you think the Western media will report this? I'm sure not truthfully.
No, it's one has to say that I'm often asked, how can we explain the intense Russophobia in the United Kingdom? That is, it's virulent. And then, of course, you could talk historically, going back to the Crimean War, even though we were allies in the Second World War already by May 1945, Churchill was talking about Operation Unthinkable, various military interventions. So basically, there's, well, but this is one reason of the cause of the war. After the end of the Cold War in 1989-91, as this marvelous American diplomat puts it, there was no place for Russia. It wanted to join this collective West. It even asked to join NATO, or some sort of framework of security framework with the Western powers, with Atlantic powers. And so the Times, in other words, will give no quarter. That's the terrible thing. And that's, in other words, it's you could say it's almost pathological Russophobia, which means that, I used to go before the war, to talk to British policymakers. And I would ask this question in the FCO, as it was then, Ministry of Defence, what do you think Russia's legitimate security interests are? And I would never get a straight answer, implying, of course, they didn't have any, except simply to humble down, accept Western hegemony, Western dominance. Russia was willing to accept Western leadership, but not dominance, just like China today and many other countries, the middle powers, as Mark Carney would talk about them. No one is going to accept that today, because we live in, with a Charter United Nations international system where we have sovereign states, but we need to build a framework building on the principles of the UN Charter based on comity, powers great and middle and small, working together for the public good. Now, we're a long way from that, but I'm trying to educate the Times of London and the Telegraph and so on in that tone, because we really need a huge, if you like, a philosophical change of thinking, especially, given so many global challenges which we have today.
How long do you think Zelensky's got? And I I've got no idea. He could hang around for a while. He could disappear very quickly. Do you think they'll ask for their money back? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got some savings put away.
Oh, he's got big savings going on. I mean, the Panama Papers showed, we don't know exactly, but certain apartments, flats abroad. But Zelensky himself, of course, is facing the biggest political challenge. Political life in Ukraine, which was frozen, well, for even before the war, since 2021 at least, or even 2020, is coming back to life. Parliament is now becoming far more active. Even Yulia Tymoshenko, the head of the Fatherland Party, is now back on the scene. And as we saw, the corruption scandal just a few weeks ago, which forced him to lose his chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, and he's put the head of the military intelligence, Budanov, in charge of that to shore up his position. But Budanov is considered very closely integrated with the US security apparatus. So at the moment, Zelensky is continuing, but it's clear that Trump has shown his dissatisfaction several times by not just going back to that famous meeting in the White House, that Zelensky's stubbornness. But of course, if Zelensky was to make concessions, he would be swept out of power by his own, the militant nationalists, which I mentioned before. So he's in an impossible position. Clearly, that we're looking for a new type of leader who could genuinely make concessions. But if you give up land for peace, and more, by the way, there's huge opposition to that within Ukraine, but public opinion is shifting that way. But the nationalist formations, so famously the Azov, which is part of the army and part of the National Guard as well, they've warned it. As I said earlier, they'd hang him in the Khreshchatyk, which is the main road in Kiev.
Yeah, we have a dear friend of ours. He's still with us, but he's not working with us anymore. George Eliasson used to have some horrendous stories about Azov, and he's a very lucky man to be still alive. Just want to know who's waiting in the wings to take Zelensky's, and who will they vote for? Is anybody worth the pinch of salt at the moment?
No, the second point, no. But those waiting in the wings are those who can do a deal. So we've got, of course, Zaluzhny, who used to be head of the army. He's now the Ukrainian ambassador in London. And of course, Budanov himself is a potential candidate who is, as I say now, the chief of staff to President Zelensky. So there may be a type of palace coup, and there's much talk of that, again, with the support of a revived parliamentary opposition and political debate. There's, of course, a few people in exile. Alexei Arestovich, who used to be a very close advisor, he certainly would like to throw his hat in the ring. But whether, and this is the problem, has been for Ukrainian polity since independence in 1991, that there are these divisions. But these divisions, until the war, and to this day, are divisions within a vision of a Ukrainian statehood. So no one is talking that should be, in other words, subsumed under Russia and so on. So Western alarmism, Russia doesn't want the responsibility, of course, to govern the non-occupied part. And there's a whole net, or if you like, a net of complexities here. So, but Zelensky himself, including that extraordinarily bizarre speech he gave at the Davos meeting in January, just a week ago, in which he excoriated the Europeans for not providing enough support, money, military arms, and so on, which, of course, was trying to please the Trumpians. But it was a bizarre speech, and one has to say that Zelensky, in my view, has been out of his depth since the beginning. He's been one of the most catastrophic leaders in world history. If you define a good leader as one which averts and secures the state, prevents a catastrophe, makes the people live more prosperous and happily, well, on all counts, he has failed in the most spectacular manner. He will go down in history as a comedian who should never have been elected president, and he failed to stand up for his own views, which was this multi-confessional, multilingual, tolerant, democratic, prosperous Ukraine, which you all love to see. I want, out of this debris, we want to see that for the great Ukrainian people to be able to live in dignity, honesty, and in peace with all their neighbors, including Russia. I mean, can I just say one thing? I mean, that hate speech, which used to come out for so long out of Galicia, Lvov, and so on, not by all. There were some many notable good people coming out from Western Ukraine. But the dominant feature was this extraordinary viciousness, virulence, Muscali na Vislach to the gallows. I heard this 10, 20, 30 years ago. I said, guys, this is going to lead to the disaster, to your state failure. But of course, that tone after the Maidan of 2014, that became dominant. And of course, this doesn't justify the war. I'm a peacenik. I'd find you just keep talking until absolutely you try to find a peaceful way out of all of this. But we are where we are. And we're still, this is why I really find it's unforgivable for the Macrons, the Merzes, the Starmers, the Kallases in Europe, still war talk, but they should accompany that by a bit more peace talk.
I'm just thinking, do you think the people that put Zelensky in power, the oligarchs that decided he would be a great leader, do you think they'll be asking for their money back? And normally you'd say, go back to your other job. Zelensky was a terrible comedian too. So at least he's a terrible politician, terrible leader, and terrible comedian. Can you tell me your thoughts on, because Europe's such a stable bunch of men and women. I mean, they're just fantastic. What about future Russian relations with Europe? How do you see that? And also future US relations. How do you see that too?
Well, starting at the top, I mean, I've always argued, I'll just say this very briefly, there's at least 4 levels to this conflict. Fortunately, the US-Russian, the great power, as we used to call it, the superpower relationship, is getting onto some sort of new stage. It's very bumpy because, Trumpian foreign policy has its own peculiarities. The second level is this Russian-European level, which it really has to be what, for me, as a committed European in the, not this existing European Union, but one who believes that the United Kingdom and that Western Europe has to really live this peace project, which we were talking about after 45 and the establishment of the European Union. But at the moment, it's turned, and the only language is this, the whole continent, western part of the continent is seized by war fever. You may have seen just yesterday, the head of the German Reserve and Armed Forces was talking about, 65,000 men, complete Cold War mobilization, strengthening bridges, having, medical facilities for fatalities and injuries, not just 1,000 in a year, but 1,000 a day. We're talking war. It's unbelievable. So, and as I say, more sanctions and the attempt of this dreadful Ursula von der Leyen Commission to not just stop Russian energy coming to Europe now, but in perpetuity. So the two halves of the continent, and of course, there's the equivalents on the Russian side who say that basically Russia's European journey for the last 500 years is over. They now have to build a stable North Eurasian community in partnership with its, Central Asia, partnership with China, with India, and so on. So we're witnessing the emergence of a post-Western world, which, from the Russian perspective, doesn't necessarily mean it's post-American as well, but not anti-American, but it's certainly anti-European. And of course, in the other level, there has to be, in my view, bridge building between the Russian and Ukrainian communities. Because one of the reasons for this war is that they're so close, so much intermarriage. They're Eastern Slavic, they're Eastern, Orthodox in religion mostly, even though bitter divisions even there. So there has to be, and so in other words, the foundation for any durable peace is a new type of Ukraine to emerge, a pluralistic, tolerant, multi-confessional one, and on that basis we can build out for a stronger peace project. But of course, that's all idealistic. At the moment, we're going the other way. the language of hatred and violence and war has seized the continent, which is, even though there's maybe little glimmers, as I said, even Macron. But the thing with Macron, the president of France, is that what he says in the morning can be very different from what he says in the afternoon. And by tea time, and after tea, he's saying something totally different. So he's, I remember talking, if I may say so, with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of one of his early initiatives way back even in 2019, when he said there can be no peace in Europe against Russia. It has to be with Russia. So I said this to Lavrov, and he says, look, you just can't trust him. And most European leaders, Western leaders, what they say today, they completely repudiate tomorrow. And that, of course, goes for the US leadership over the years.
And you look at Trump. I mean, again, he's a bit like Macron. He'll change his mind 3 times in that day. But maybe someone could suggest that his extraction in Venezuela, he could probably do the same in Ukraine too. Who knows?
That's what some people say about Budanov being appointed there. That, in other words, that there may be a swift move. And of course, the analogy we make there is with South Vietnam, with Diem in 1964, which then led to a succession of weak Vietnamese leaders. It didn't save the situation, but the CIA coup there was an attempt to believing that change of leader. It is part of the puzzle, but it'll need far more than just simply a change of leader.
Brilliant conversation. I appreciate your time. I'll let you get up early because you're in the UK at the moment, and it's still early. It's almost 9. So it's good to hear, good to see. Richard, Professor Emeritus Richard Sakwa, if somebody wants to find out more about you, more of your, and we mentioned your books, and we'll put that up on the a bit later on, so they can go purchase your book and read some great words. But if they wanted to follow you on socials, do you have any socials at the moment?
Yeah. That's again, I don't. The reason is that once I started, my first book on Ukraine came out just after the Maidan, and they were told it was vicious. I mean, it really was. There's a special unit in the Ukrainian presidential administration designed to intimidate Western academics and independent thinking. So they pile in. For example, a great person who I have enormous respect, Lord Robert Skidelsky. We've written letters in the tone of peace and so on in The Guardian and other newspaper, Financial Times. We, 7 of us, call for peace. Then we have 71, 81 others counter-mobilize against us. Anyway, so no, but the University of Kent website has got a lot of my, if you can go through the Department of Politics, they will see, some publications and works there.
Richard Sakwa, it's been a pleasure, and I would like to do this more often. We have some extraordinary guests on, and you're one of those. And again, appreciate your time. This is The World Today. Coming up next, we'll talk to Greg Simons from Bangladesh in Dhaka.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to the World Today. Mike Ryan here. Nice to have your company. It's 9:15 in the UK right now, 7:15 in Queensland. 100 years behind still, and I don't know what time it is in Dakar. It's also 8:45 in Sydney and Melbourne. Professor Greg Simons is a geopolitical commentator and a professor based at the Department of Journalism, Media and Communication at Daffodil International University in Bangladesh. He also has expertise on Russian mass media, terrorism, public diplomacy, the relationship between politics, information and armed conflict. He is currently working on the role of information and communication in contemporary geopolitics at that particular university. We're going to talk to Greg today about the recent developments in Syria, the fate of the Kurds and other groups, as well as the stratospheric rise of Syrian President Giuliani, or al-Giuliani, who's meeting this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, cheers, Mike.
What's your thoughts on Giuliani meeting with Putin?
Well, I mean, Giuliani's doing a bit of hedging because he knows that the relations can change with the US on a drop of a hat, because if he remembers the US relations with other terrorists, well, one in particular comes to mind. Osama bin Laden was useful in Afghanistan, but became a liability later on. So I dare say he is just covering his bases.
And I would imagine Trump, he probably wouldn't be too adverse to a conversation between Giuliani and Putin. I mean, Putin isn't the arch enemy that Trump would. I mean, I know you're not a favourite of Trump, but they do have a relationship. I wonder how much Putin would trust him, since a certain number of drones tried to take him out. He decided to move, where he was suggested to stay at a particular place. He didn't trust it, and that's where he was going to have the meeting via communications with Trump about peace and stuff. Anyway, they blew the place up, but he had moved, so nothing lost there. So I'd imagine that the trust that Putin would have for Trump, and vice versa, also the trust that Trump would have for Putin. But there is a relationship there. So I can't really see at this stage enough of a concern that Giuliani is meeting with Putin.
Well, I mean, for Giuliani, this is a matter of survival, because he knows US proxies and clients have a short life. I mean, you were talking with Richard Sakwa earlier and mentioned President Diem of South Vietnam, who was brought to power by a CIA-backed coup. But what everyone in the Global South knows, he is also taken out by a CIA-backed coup some years later, when he became a liability. So, I mean, history, if you know it, provides plenty of examples just how reliable the US is as a partner. I mean, the Kurds know this very well by now too, or they should do.
There's been some serious violence in Syria. Which groups are involved at the moment?
Oh, there's lots of different factions. I mean, because the Kurds, for example, have seemed to be more or less abandoned because this is the fate of most US proxies. I mean, they've been abandoned in Iraq and now they're abandoned in Syria. So there's a long history of it. But you've got al-Jilani, of course, who was not only al-Baghdadi's number two from ISIS, but also the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria, which kept on getting rebranded, who was leading a crusade, if we want to call it this way, against all groups that oppose or are seen as heretical to this should we say, I don't know what teaching which they go by. This includes the Christian groups, the Alawites, but interestingly, although Trump is bombing Nigeria because of its alleged persecution of Christians, he does not do the same to al-Jilani for this reason. So, yeah, I mean, Syria is a very ethnically and religiously diverse country, which makes it very vulnerable to fracturing. And the US loves to fracture and wedge a country in order to weaken it, turn each side against the other.
What about ISIS? Are they back in business? And if they are, who are they murdering this time?
Well, I mean, ISIS are back in business. If you look at al-Jilani's former, should we say, affiliation, I mean, he's very much part of it. So, and you can see those bearded Democrats which are going around slaughtering different ethnic groups, including Alawites, Christians, and so forth, and those who do not align with this this rather extreme interpretation of Islam. Well, I mean, they're absolutely in business, and I don't think they've ever really been out of business. This was threatened with, for example, the entry at the invitation of the former President Bashar al-Assad to fight these terrorist groups. Iran and Russia were instrumental in weakening them, which is why you have something like ISIS-K, which which doesn't attack US, doesn't attack Israel, and nominates its enemies as being Iran, Russia, and China, the three main geopolitical opponents of the US, very conveniently.
What about the Kurds? Are they feeling a bit miserable at the moment? Have the US abandoned the Kurds?
Yeah, I mean, the Kurds were useful for while it lasted, but Kurds do not look at history very well. I mean, we look at what happened to them when they were used against Saddam Hussein. They were repeatedly abandoned there when it became inconvenient. So, I mean, there's consistency in this, a useful proxy. But of course, I mean, it's also a very problematic proxy because they're in conflict with this terrorist in charge, al-Jilani, but also they are rubbing Turkish security up the wrong way too, because Kurds, PKK, and so forth are seen as a significant security threat. And one of the big points of contention between US and Turkey, especially since the 2003 Iraq war, when the US started using Kurds again and making this Turkish area on the Turkish border. So history repeats itself.
Yeah, we see President Trump. You would never have thought he would know so much about the Middle East. He's just amazing, isn't he? And it must make you feel warm and fuzzy within. I know it doesn't.
Oh, he's an intellectual giant. He proves it every time with caps lock in the middle of the night on Truth Social.
That's fantastic. The world is a much safer place not. Tell me, Syria, is it more unstable now that we no longer have Assad? Is it out of control? And don't forget, Giuliani was he's a very good-looking leader, according to your hero, President Trump.
Yeah, I mean, we know what a fine and excellent judge of character Donald J. Trump is, and I mean, this absolutely cements it. It's nothing like a pair of scissors and a comb won't do to brush up a hardened jihadist to make him put him in a suit and make him look fantastic. But yeah, Syria is a basket case. I mean, also an interesting thing about Al-Jilani, I mean, his conversation with Netanyahu in Hebrew. I mean, nothing speaks more of a devoted jihadist than speaking Hebrew to the head of the political leader of Israel. And the fact that he does not contest the Israeli incrementally advancing occupation and annexation of Syrian territory. So, and now you've got the issue, Turks aren't happy about this. And you have just internal chaos and turmoil, which is just, it's not going to end. I think it's only going to increase, especially with time. And Al-Jilani may well find himself in the Osama bin Laden scenario where he becomes embittered or a liability, and he might be given some more democracy by the US.
What about the grand plan for Syria, including the US position, Russia position, Turkey, and Israel?
I think the US has no grand plan. As long as Al-Jilani is a good terrorist and does what Washington says, then he'll be left alone. As far
He's
as
good looking too, isn't he? He's good looking.
oh yes. I mean, he shapes up well on camera with a bit of grooming and dress management.
Big, beautiful. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just wait for some of those fawning posts on Truth Social from Trump with some huggy bromance moments. Yeah.
Diplomacy at its best. That's all I can say.
As far as Israel is concerned, Israel is happy that Syria is a basket case because Syria was one of those pivotal countries in the Arab-Israeli wars, but also an ally with Iran. So in this case, Israel's happy. Turkey, they're concerned about the Kurdish issue, and of course they tend to be quite opportunistic when things like this happen. And now that the Kurds seem to no longer have protection of what Rutte called Daddy, so Daddy Trump is no longer supporting the Kurds, they see opportunity to take issue with what they see as a Kurdish problem.
Yeah, it's far too complex I was going to say for my simple mind, but what I was going to say, it's far too complex, I think, for Donald Trump's, as some would say, simple mind. But again, you are one, and I apologise because you are one of his greatest fans.
Well, he declared himself a stable genius, a very stable genius in the Trump 1.0, so I think it's quite a bit of harsh and unwarranted character assassination by you. You should hang your head.
Slap me down. And I apologise. I'll be in the naughty corner if you were my lecturer. get out of that corner now. How dare you say terrible things? Just quickly, for about 15 seconds, your thoughts on Iran and the Armada sailing towards it.
Well, I mean, this gives me a kind of feeling of deja vu, because we remember in 1941 when the British sent their Armada, Prince of Wales and Repulse, to scare the Japanese, and how that ended. It ended with a disaster. And the Japanese didn't have hypersonic missiles and the support of China and Russia, which Iran in its current shape and form does. So you've got a lot of bluff and bluster by Trump at the moment. But if he sees this is going to be personal public humiliation for him, he'll back down. If he feels, well, if you feed a narcissist with megalomania a victory, it's a rather hollow one, like Venezuela and like Greenland, then he might be stupid enough to try it. And then we have the second Prince of Wales and Repulse moment, because there'll be a sitting duck there. This gunboat diplomacy will not work, especially when the Iranian people back the Iranian government, even if they have issues with the Iranian government.
That's always a problem. We're going to rescue you. No, we don't want to be rescued. To go back. Dr. Greg Simons, thank you very much for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do, I'm sure Donald Trump does, tell us how they can do that.
Well, look for the most politically incorrect spaces on digital space. I can be found on ResearchGate, which I think is one of my most active ones, or Academia EDU. There are different politically incorrect videos of me on YouTube with different ones from TRT World and other ones, which if you
I know it's terrible.
type them up, yes. So you're anywhere there's political incorrectness, I can be kind of found.
And here, often. And we love it too.
Yes.
And you know I get into trouble because you bring out the naughty boy in me. So I do get into trouble in a production meeting after this. So thank you for doing that to me.
My pleasure. Always glad to be of assistance.
Okay. This has been the World Today. Dr. Greg Simons with his words of wisdom. Great to have your company. Back again, same time tomorrow, along with the protagonists. Have a great day, great night. If you're in Australia, if you're in New Zealand, it's almost time for bed. Thank you very much. Again, this is The World Today.